some, I guess, share valuation weirdness with JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. But today we've got, real movement in, I guess, the trading league tables, right? Because Morgan Stanley had been aiming to get over Goldman Sachs with trading revenue for years, and they finally have achieved it.
Yes, the results, as you pointed out, across the board were very strong for all the large investment banks and the universal money center banks that had obviously big investment banking operations. And Morgan Stanley's results do stand out. Not only did they post those strong numbers that you just referenced, but they also put up a return on tangible common equity number of over 23%, which is a very strong number. So across the board, the capital markets revenues for all of the players were very strong. And even the regionals, P&C reported today, and they have a smaller investment banking operation, and their numbers were better than expected because of that as well.
But PNC, it looks like they're paying too much for their deposits. For some reason, the shares fell, at least in the pre-market.
No, that's fair. They had a greater mix of commercial deposits, and those rates were higher than your consumer deposits. And that was part of the reason that you saw some uptick there in the deposit rates. But we should also remember that it's also a timing issue. The Fed cut rates late in September, so the third quarter results don't really reflect the rate cut. And as that rate cut moves through on the deposit side, for all banks, including PNC, you'll see lower deposit costs in the fourth quarter and into next year.
By the way, we have PNC year-to-date shares up now, down 5%. You haven't outperformed, so what kind of upside do you see there?
We think there's real strong upside for all the regional banks, and the reason being is our view that the Fed is likely to cut rates another 25 to 50 basis points in the next 6 months, and this will steepen the yield curve, and that will be very positive for regional banks. And not only that, we think loan growth could pick up, particularly commercial loan growth. And regional banks tend to have 60 to 70% of the revenues coming from lending versus the money centers and the investment banks, of course. Then the money center case is closer to 55, 60%. So if we're right that the yield curve steepens and loan growth picks up, regional banks like PNC and others will certainly see better performance in the next 12 months.
Morgan Stanley, on the other hand, up 32% year to date. You have a hold or a sector perform on that bank. You think, the shares are overpriced at this point?
And the challenge for and to be candid, we missed the run in Morgan Stanley, but when you look at the valuations of these companies, they're priced for peak performance, and they're delivering. And so that is, I think, one of the real positives here. The real question going forward is that will the capital markets activity in terms of ECM, DCM, and advisory continue to at this very strong pace? We think it will through the end of the year and into next year, but it's tougher to figure it out, of course, in the second half of the following year, meaning 2026. But if they can maintain, and their peers, this elevated level of ECM, DCM, and advisory, as well as trading numbers, then the stock is going to hang in there. But we got to remember we're near record levels in some of those categories, so it might be tough to surpass that. And the other thing, too, is when you compare the year-over-year increases this year for the investment banks and the capital markets players, the increases have been great. But next year, even with the elevated numbers, the year-over-year increases are, that so-called second derivative, the rate of change, is going to decline for all of these banks. So that's another thing investors have to keep in mind.
Sure, great to get some.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and simulcasting on X Spaces. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. If you like the content that I make, all this is for free. I have thousands of videos out there for free. Please help support the work by going to the website and donating through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee on the webpage. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. I have 5 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all those channels. I have X and GETTR. You can follow me there. You can also be a subscriber to my Substack or Patreon channel. These are many ways to help support the work. Please share the links and ask your social media to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. If you pay attention to what I have to say, you will be able to navigate through tumultuous markets and improve your health and wellness. So thank you for joining. What we're going to do is listen in on Fox Live, Live Now Fox. They're talking to Mamdani.
To education. We've seen time and time again this mayoral administration look to make it nearly impossible for the next one to fulfill so much of the laws that we are inheriting. And my first order of business will be to exhaust every single option we have in front of us. Last I checked, there are about 111 vacant positions in the school construction authority. How can we say what the fastest speed is of construction when we have positions that are intentionally being left vacant within that very entity? So my job is going to be fill those positions, make it clear that we have a law that we have to follow through on. And I've appreciated the ways in which this chancellor has looked to fulfill that law in ways that are both required creativity and ingenuity. Now it's also important to have those ways be backed up by a mayor who is looking to actually utilize the capital budget and public capacity to ensure that we're fulfilling the law.
I wanted to ask you, there's been significant shortage of paraprofessionals. I think, I forget the exact number, but I wanted to see if you wanted to address how you would address that shortage. I know the unions called for a larger pay raise that goes against the pattern of the labor agreement. I don't know what you're thinking.
I'm going to forget the exact bill number. 1,600. It's by, I think Keith Bowers introduced this. This would create a $10,000 supplement for paraprofessionals. I think it's critically important. And I supported it in the primary. I continue to support it today. And the reason I do is that we have an increasing number of vacancies of paraprofessional positions within New York City. And part of this is because we are paying people a wage that they cannot afford to live in the city anymore. And so I think that that continues to be a critical way of meeting that need.
Do you support the power bill to give it the $10,000?
Yes. Yes.
I'm just wondering, given the fact that we have this law that says we have to have smaller classes,
This is but one step that we are taking. Right? We've seen estimates of 7,000 teachers needed over the next few years, estimates as high as you're saying of 12,000. And what we need to do is every single year be expanding the capacity of teachers that we're hiring. This program, which would hire 1,000 teachers additionally every year, would cost $12 million. We will pay for that by saving additional money that we're currently spending in close to $10 billion in contracts. When I speak about these contracts, I'm also speaking about a system where you'll find different school districts procuring the exact same thing from sometimes the same vendors, sometimes different vendors. And
the thing is that this is a classic guy that every time that he's asked a question, are you going to be supporting this? Are you going to be spending more money? Are you? Yeah. He's going to tax New Yorkers to death, and they're going to move out. All right. I want to play Altimeter CEO. He was being interviewed by CNBC. But before I do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and be prepared for the fall and the winter. It's really important, all right? This fall and winter is going to be problematic for ones that are living in the United States and worldwide, but definitely for the ones that can get my products in the United States. I think you need to stock up, all right? So we're going to talk about a few products that you need to stock up throughout this transmission today. One item that you really need to stock up on is the drops and the lozenges. The moment you have that throat irritation, you want to take the lozenges. You can get them in blueberry, honey and lemon, and cherry. Get a few bags for your household, for work, for home. You never know when you need it. And I have in stock elderberry zinc, all right? Get a few bags for your household, really important. The reason why is the moment you have that throat irritation, by taking the lozenges, you're neutralizing and you're maintaining that barrier to prevent perturbing your epithelial lining. The mutations that have taken place attach to the epithelial lining. So you want to prevent that. By the moment you start having that throat irritation, you want to take the lozenges right away, all right? Now, daily, what you should be doing, and this will help to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system, is to take the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points. Take either one, but take it with take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds, then swallow. What that does is it neutralizes, it improves the health of the oral cavity and the oral pharynx. So you're neutralizing and you're improving the health of it. You're maintaining the mucosal barrier, and you're keeping your epithelial lining, especially in your oral pharynx, healthy. You're boosting up your immune system. You should be doing that every day. I've been doing this protocol for over 5 years. Now, if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Same thing, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds, and then swallow it. And again, this will improve the oral cavity and the oral pharynx and neutralize. Really important for you to pay attention to me. So please go to my store, get the Cleanse or the Max 35, and get the lozenges and drops, all right? The moment you have that throat irritation, knock it out. Knock it out right away. It's really important for you to pay attention to what I have to say here. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All right, let's go to altimeter.
AI and Microsoft has now agreed to buy Aligned data centers for about $40 billion. That deal marks the largest data center transaction now on record. Aligned operates in its planned capacity now of more than 5 gigawatts across 50 data centers. Transaction expected to close in the first half of 2026. And this is a nice way back into our conversation with you, Brad, Gerstner, about what is going on here. The opportunity set. $40 billion.
Just a small $40 billion transaction, again, in the space that we're all talking about. Maybe to just provide some context here. The Manhattan Project was $4 billion. You inflation adjust that, that's $40 billion. It was 1% of GDP. So if you take 1% of GDP, that's 300 to 400 billion, okay? That was a government-funded project that had a big impact on the economy. The compute build-out that's going on now is 10x the Manhattan Project with no government funding, all privately funded by deals like the one you just heard announced, right? So this is when you think about the tailwinds in the economy, right, as we head into 2026, think about the stimulus of now a 10x Manhattan Project. Then we have this massive reindustrialization investment. You heard JP Morgan yesterday, $1.5 trillion. You heard Stellantis today talk about their $13 billion investment. Bessent's talking about it at the White House today. A massive reindustrialization build out on the back of trillions from the Middle East, 550 billion from Japan, etc. So, and then you have this deregulation and the M&A wave that's coming on. So I think there's a lot of tailwinds for this economy.
Yeah, it sounds like something that's hard to bet against.
Sure. You know, the thing, short term, I agree with him, but here's the problem. And he might be right, but a lot of times history rhymes. And because he was talking about M&A deregulation, there's a new financial engineering product with individuals being able to invest through ETFs into private equity and private credit. So there's new financial engineering vehicles that individuals can put in their 401k or into their IRA. There's this big build out with the hyperscalers. It's very similar to, I would say, the railroads. So I'm not positive that everything is copacetic and we're going to see all the blossoming fruits of AI before the bubble burst, because investment is, there's always over investment before the real economy takes benefit of what was built out. In almost all cases. So most likely there will be a bubble burst with these hyperscalers. The real economy will benefit from AI, but that's not going to be through the hyperscalers. It's going to be through the small caps, small cap indexes, the Russell 2000, types. So will the bubble burst now? Well, no, it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but could it happen next year? Yeah. I think there is at least a 40% chance or higher that it could burst next year, and probably an 80% chance of bursting in 2027. Could it go up a little bit more? Yeah, but I'm a little concerned that a lot of ETFs that are investing in the S&P 500, that are kind of tied to the S&P 500, a lot of them are leveraged to, they're a little bit more heavier weighted with the hyperscalers, the Mag 7. Well, they're going to get clobbered. That's where the bubble's going to burst. But will it happen right now? No. Is there still a leg up? Yeah. Was that tariff news from Trump on Friday the beginnings of the bubble? No, I don't think so. But because of all these different things that are happening, on top of the doom loop in the UK, the doom loop in France, the tariff wars, what's going to happen in the Pacific in terms of Taiwan, what's going on with Ukraine, will the peace be maintained in the Middle East? These are all unknowns. So I am bullish in terms of the overall long-term economy for the United States. Absolutely. I agree with them. But will it burst before we see the real benefits? Probably. So I have trepidation with the Mag 7 in 2006 and 2007. I'm sorry, not 2006, 2000. I have trepidation in the Mag 7 for 2026 and 2027. That's what I meant. So, and it's interesting I say that because 2007 and 2008 was during the whole Lehman issue. All right, so but 2026 and 2027, I have trepidation for the Mag 7. Because these PE, the PEs, the price per earnings, the price of the stock to the earnings, they're too high. They're way too high. Way too high. They're talking about NVIDIA being, multiples of trillions of dollars in worth. Really? This quick? Something doesn't seem right. Something doesn't seem right. So that's my take on it. But I could see his take, but he's looking at it more long term. But also, you got to remember, he's heavily invested in this. Is he going to say that the bubble's going to burst when he's heavily invested? Of course not. Of course not. But have trepidation in the Mag 7 in 2026 and 2027. All right, let's continue.
That's right. And you're doing it in a moment in time that the rate, that rates are coming down. And we talked at the beginning of the year. I remember I was on here in March, and you guys said, which way are you going with the markets? And I said, listen, if we follow Navarro down the $2.5 trillion tariff path, I can't be on board with that. And we had taken down our exposures in the market. I said, but if we land the plane on the best in consensus, $350 billion of tariffs, right, which includes, China, if we get the big bill done and we extend tax cuts, then we could be in a rate cutting cycle by the end of the year, and we're at the beginning of this AI super cycle. And when you look at all this, again, you have to give the president credit. Not only did they bring this peace deal to Gaza this week, which is extraordinary, and he and Witkoff.
This is important what he's
Jared
saying.
Kushner.
How many times are the Federal Reserve going to lower rates? We're probably going to see another rate cut this year, maybe 2, and another 4, maybe 5 in 2026. But once the rate cut starts to hint that it's going to slow down and it's just going to stay, don't you think that's when the bubble is going to burst? Because they're going to have to, that would be a time where you're going to have to raise rates. So we're talking about the end of 2026, the beginning of 2027, where the bubble may burst. And this coincides with what I was saying about Rosh Hashanah, September 11th, 2026. The shofar's not blown because it's on Shabbos. Well, that's going to be a curse on the earth. The earth, there's always a curse that takes place when the shofar is not blown on the Shabbos. Now, that curse could be at a personal level, it could be at a nationwide level, or it could be at a worldwide level. We just don't know what level it may be at. But it always happens, always. So when you look at all of these different things with the mosaic, there's a high probability that something bad's going to happen in 2026 into 2027, which plays right into what he's saying. Oh, there's a super cycle because the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates. When are they going to stop cutting rates? That's the better question. And when they stop cutting rates, what does that mean for the super cycle? On top of, and the thing is that when you have financial engineering and deregulation, that speeds up the bursting of the bubble. Because people are leveraged and things you start having problems in the market, and then they have to deleverage and there's a big sell-off. And it's asymmetric. It goes down quicker than it goes up.
A lot of credit for it, but they landed the plane on a lot of these tariff deals. They got the big bill done in the extension of the tax cuts. You know, we have started to see the beginning of the rate cutting cycle. Inflation hasn't abated, but it seems to be in check. So just the flight path of the plane, Andrew. Now, of course, the NASDAQ is up 35% off the bottom from, May 2nd. So I think you have to adjust your position sizes accordingly. But anybody who wants to fight the Fed and fight this stimulus into the economy heading into next year seems to me.
Where's the new opportunity though in this market? If the NASDAQ's already made the move, if you will, is there a piece of this market that you think is unloved that should be loved?
Yeah, it's funny. 2005, I had one of the great portfolio managers of the world, Paul Reeder, runs Park Capital in Boston. And he would come into my office. I had all my public investment in Google. And Google would go up and he would come and he said, well, what are we going to do next? I would say, buy more Google, right? Oftentimes the best ideas are your current ideas, are the last ideas, right? When I look at NVIDIA over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to continue to compound. Why? Because the things we just talked about, you got to build out this compute. Don't trust, just Sam Altman. If you listen to Satya Nadella, if you listen to Sundar, if you listen to Hock Tan, if you listen to it, they will all tell you the same thing. We are going to be compute constrained for the next several years, for certain, right? You had Greg Brockman on yesterday. Greg said if we had 10x more compute, I don't know if we'd have 10x more revenue at OpenAI, but we'd have a lot more revenue. The fact of the matter is this is an existential, not only an economic security matter, but a national security matter. Right, we have to keep up in the AI race. So this is going to get built out. And so I think you can continue to invest along the compute spectrum.
Help me with one thing, and it was the tease before the 8 o'clock hour. There are some folks who say, how can I play OpenAI? I can't get access to this private company and their shares, but I can backdoor this potentially by owning either SoftBank, which obviously owns a piece of this, and Microsoft, which owns a piece of this, and we'll see obviously when if OpenAI ultimately goes public.
So we are investors in Microsoft and SoftBank in part for that reason.
Okay.
I think Microsoft in particular is really misunderstood how much they're benefiting from the present moment. I'm going to Satya on the BG2 pod coming up, and we'll explore that in depth. But one of the things I would say on that is I think there's still this underappreciation for the massive, for this massive build out that's going on. If you think that's going to occur, right, then SoftBank and Microsoft will continue to be big winners with those tailwinds.
Build a website you love with Wix.
All right, let's listen to CNBC here a little bit.
Walmart teaming up with OpenAI to allow users to make purchases directly on ChatGPT. Joining us now is more on the rise of agentic commerce and its impact on the tech sector. Mark Mahaney, Evercore ISI, head of internet research. We can talk about this. We can talk about a lot of the recent scuttlebutt surrounding AI. It's moving forward. It's unstoppable, obviously. You can talk about the Walmart deal or just all the bubble talk. I think there's a bubble within bubble talk right now.
There may be. What I'm really interested in is you had a slew of announcements just in the last 10 days. You had Expedia, Uber, Spotify, Booking.com, Walmart. They're all integrating with ChatGPT. What a sign of the times. And so it is emerging. It's still small. At 800 million is still small. You've got 2 to 3 billion person assets with Google and with Meta. But, watch this space. And if those companies are seeing early on that they need to be integrated with ChatGPT, I think you're going to see a lot more companies come on. And there's a chance here that this dramatically changes the internet landscape and the tech landscape, in the space of the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, we had that discussion, and we were told that it's going to be not just a zero-sum game for get involved, working.
I will be.
On Uber, that suddenly Uber's ride-hailing business is going to double because they're on ChatGPT. Why isn't it just people going to ChatGPT instead of doing it the old way for Uber? Why will the companies maybe they need to be there to not lose business, but are they going to be able to add 20, 30, 40% to their business by just being on the AI?
No, I think that's silly. No, but could it be?
Who made that point? What's the dude's name?
But there could be incremental traffic. That's what's important. And
you at your book party. I saw him at your book party. You were arguing with him about what's the name of a Kinsey guy?
Oh, McElwolf.
Yeah. Remember?
Yes, we were talking about all of this.
You looked at him like he had 3 heads when he.
And then we had Jamie Dimon talk about it just yesterday in Washington D.C.
So what did he say? Did he say it's additive or?
Well, I think he was saying vendor financing unto itself is not.
We're not talking about. We're talking about whether Uber being on ChatGPT doubles Uber's business.
Right. That's the ultimate question.
No, I don't think it does. But there's actually you should think about more positively for a name like a Booking, an Expedia, eventually Amazon too, probably, and a Walmart. This is just another customer acquisition cost. Channel.
Who's paying who? Because we just had another retail analyst who was here saying
Walmart's business isn't going to grow because you're on ChatGPT and being able to purchase Walmart goods, or even Amazon, or Uber. All these companies have their own app. All these companies have a website, right? So it's just another means to be able to purchase. But what it is important is it's the first step for a artificial intelligent client, or not client, an artificial intelligent agent, where you have a device. It's not going to be your phone at home, all right? You have a device like a HomePod, all right? And you're going to be asking that HomePod to purchase your groceries. So you no longer have to go to the store. A lot of people, especially in New York, they go online or on an app, let's say on the phone, and you order your groceries and it's delivered on X day. The company that normally does this is Fresh Direct, but it can be Whole Foods does it, right? So there's different companies that can do it. Even in other states, you can have home delivery through certain grocery stores. It's really easy. You just go on their website and order. Does it add to the revenue? Probably not. Does it add to the cost to the end user? Yes, because there's a delivery cost. Do you save time? Yes. You don't have to go to the grocery store, get in your car and drive to the grocery store, pick it up, and then drive back, and then so it's more convenient, but you're paying for that convenience. Is it good for the elderly who can't move around? Absolutely. But will it add to revenue for these companies? I don't think so. I don't think so. It's the next step of this. First, you have to integrate the different companies into an AI system like ChatGPT. I'm surprised that, I'm sure we're going to hear Grok will be doing this too. But you just ask your AI, order groceries from XYZ, all right, from Whole Foods, and please deliver it, on Tuesday or whatever. So it does it. So you're building up an infrastructure where you have lots of vendors that are integrated with the ChatGPT. The next step is to actually have a physical device that's more like a HomePod or a robot. And I think this is what Apple's trying to do with this, what they call a desktop robot. That this is going to actually be an AI agent, where it's starting to do things for you. At the very beginning, it's going to be booking your flights, booking your hotels, ordering groceries, maybe making a doctor's appointment, all this stuff. The thing is that these different places that it's going to be interfacing with, the vendor will have to somehow have some sort of plugin or API into the ChatGPT and have some sort of ordering process take place. Being able to make that order through your voice command, through the AI robot. But I definitely see this is coming. This is definitely coming. But will it be additive? No, if it is, it's very small amount. Because you're already, the number of people that are going to use Expedia to purchase travel or the grocery store around you to deliver, that's pretty much fixed. It's not going to be that much of a revenue generating avenue just because you have a plug-in to ChatGPT. But it will add to convenience. It's almost like you have your own, you're having your own assistant. There's an AI assistant, and its capability will go up more and more. Now, what's surprising is that Apple should have been the first mover on this, not OpenAI. That's surprising. Tim Cook really dropped the ball on this one.
Look, these retailers were all slow when the internet first launched. They let all these e-retailers come in and eat their lunch. They don't want to get caught in the cold again. Are they paying ChatGPT for this, and is it a lot of money?
Eventually they will. I think what ChatGPT is going to do is, this is like Mark Zuckerberg in private. Build out the user base, build out the engagement, and charge them, but a lot later. I don't think they're going to really lean into monetization.
Just say, yeah, we want to be everywhere.
Until they got 2 billion users, and I think that's when they'll start.
Right. So once to charge everybody. So the question is whose revenue is increasing? Is it Whole Foods revenue increasing? No, because you're ordering, and you can do a pickup, so you don't have to do a delivery, but you're ordering through this agent that's plugged into ChatGPT. If it's a delivery, the end user, the customer, is going to have to pay the delivery cost plus the cost of the groceries. It's free to do, right? If it costs money to do this, no one would adopt it. No end user would use it. Now, the revenue stream for ChatGPT could be down the line in the future. They charge end users similar to Amazon Prime, where you have ChatGPT Prime, where it gives you this functionality, and you have to pay a monthly fee or an annual fee. Or what they may do is that to be plugged in, they charge a much larger fee to the enterprise, like an enterprise fee, to allow for these companies to be plugged in to their prompt. Charging Walmart, let's say in the future, $1 million a year or whatever it is, right? Or probably a transaction fee where it's a certain percentage. And that certain percentage of the actual purchase, they get a cut of it, which is like a tax. And then what will happen is that'll be passed on to the end user eventually. But it's nominal. It's a nominal fee. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. Charging the end user some sort of prime, or charging the enterprise, or through some sort of annual fee, or we have a nominal fee charge. So let's continue.
Monetization. So that's still another year or two. If you were ChatGPT and you had unlimited access to capital, unlimited access to infrastructure, why would you try to screw anything up by trying to monetize now? Wait, build up the traffic, build up the engagement. But the other side here is agentic commerce is coming. It doesn't mean it only occurs on ChatGPT. All of these, Amazon, all of these major platforms.
That sounds very monopolistic, what you were describing. We're going to let everybody come play with us, and as soon as we can, as soon as they need us more than we need them, we're going to turn on the screws and ramp it up.
Turn on the screws, charge people. I don't know. I sort of view that. I mean, this is kind of what Meta. Think about this is what Meta did. You know, you use stories or you use threads and just build up the traffic, and then later on monetize. But first, build up the traffic, build up the engagement.
But Meta is using advertising revenue, not charging the user. I mean, I don't use Facebook anymore, but I mean, so their business model is based on advertising. Now, will ChatGPT use this information and get ad revenue and sell this user data similar to Google? That might be another way to monetize. But if the end user has to pay a monthly fee like Prime, like Amazon Prime, I don't think they'll do it. I don't think those people will use it. Because I think that the people will eventually get to a point where they want to cut their expenses, not increase their expenses. Subscription fees don't last. That's something that won't last, I don't think. So there's many ways that ChatGPT could make money. OpenAI could make money on this. Nominal fee is probably the best, or user data, or a combination of the two, where there's a nominal fee and user data. But if there is a lot of money to be made in it, then there's going to be other prompts. Gemini, Google will build something that's similar, or it already has. But I mean, but it will compete in this arena. Will Apple build something that's similar? It probably needs to, but the way Apple works is they're probably going to partner with someone like Google or OpenAI. But Apple has the hardware, has a very strong hardware ethos. Has the Apple TV and the HomePod and the iPhone and the iPad, the watch. These are devices that can be used as your AI agent if it had the right software. The question is how is it going to be? How will it be accessing an AI? Is it going to be partnering up with OpenAI? Will it partner up with Google and just leverage that? Google also has hardware, so they're going to be competing with Apple, and that would, maybe they don't want to do that. See, Apple may need to build up their own AI and build on top of Surrey.
Mm-hmm.
agentic commerce capabilities. You have to make sure that when I go to Uber, it's personalized, and I don't have to always go through the same prompts. Like, they should be able to automate it a lot better, personalize a lot better. All of these e-commerce experiences, these transaction experiences, need to be agentified, and I think they will be, by the way. So the agentic, there's not just one agentic commerce winner. There can be multiple ones, but companies need to make sure they invest in that technology now. There's some companies that are doing a great job of this. You look at Amazon with this Rufus technology that they have, like, they're trying to look how much information Amazon has about you. They should be able to much better personalize the shopping experience, and I think they will. So anyway, I think that's the challenge.
Going back to the issue, I think that we were talking to Michael Wolf about
vendor financing. Yes.
No, we'll take the vendor financing piece out of that. We'll come back to that in a second. Just given that this is going to happen, how much can it grow the market for these players, or is it just a replacement?
Oh, I'm sure there's some incremental growth. I'll just step back.
I don't think it's incremental growth.
I
don't think it's incremental. I don't think it's incremental growth. If you do see on the P&L incremental revenue, it may be just natural. So if you there's data showing pre-AI, right, for Walmart, and when you look at years of data, you get an average growth rate. Yeah, there's an average growth rate. You can look at it in maybe a 10-year or 20-year window, maybe even also take a look at the average 5-year growth rate, right? And they may be different. But you take a look at maybe the last 10 years and the last 5 years growth rate, pre-AI integration, and then take a look at the AI integration, and I'm willing to bet that it's probably close to the 5-year pre-growth rate. I don't think there's going to be that much growth rate. This is a different means. What's happening is that we're seeing the beginnings of getting rid of the phone. The phone is going to be obsolete, well, which it should. It should be. Now the question is how do people communicate? And it may be actually devices like a watch, or maybe even something like Star Trek, where it's like a piece of jewelry or something that's put on a shirt, like a brooch or something like that, or maybe even a necklace or a ring. I personally don't like the watch because I think that these like Apple Watch type devices, they're not that well designed, right? So I prefer an older watch, something that looks like a watch, right? Something that's pre-digital, right? Something that preferably if you can wind it up is even better, but an older watch, more more of a conservative look, right? Not a techie look. So if you're going to access these types of device, if you're going to access the AI in a mobile setting, then you're going to have something on you, preferably small, not intrusive, because I think the phone is too intrusive now. And it has to be connected to the grid. It has to be connected to the cloud, or, and now we're talking, this is not 5G here that we're talking about here. It's probably 6 or 7G. So this is it's going to take a couple of more iterations in mobile technology before we get there.
Economy over the last 20 years. Google made it bigger because it just made it more efficient for consumers and merchants and small businesses to meet up. ChatGPT is going to do the same thing. It'll be an accelerator. It's not going to
but an accelerator for
no. He's wrong. He's wrong. He's absolutely wrong, because people are already using digital. They're using their phones. They're using the web. They're using apps compared to going to brick and mortar. So if you use ChatGPT, it's not going to be a big jump like it was during the internet days to purchase groceries or to book a flight, because all of your flights now are through the internet. So if you go through the internet on a web page, or an internet through an app, or an internet through ChatGPT, how's it any different? The end user doesn't care. It's the same thing. So how's it going to be additive? It's not going to be additive. Come on. What an idiot.
For Lyft, is it similar for everybody? Because then you're saying the entire pie is getting bigger.
No, the pie's not going to get
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Meaning, I assume you can either go to a restaurant and you can use OpenTable for that, or you could use, maybe DoorDash to bring you the food.
Well, I use the internet analogy. If you didn't figure out how to service customers, how to interact with customers on the internet, you were going to lose market share. I think the internet and agentic commerce and AI is going to increase the overall size of the market, but it's going to create all winners and losers.
No, he's wrong. He's wrong, because you don't need the AI, and you can still reach your customers through the internet. And if you're a company that hasn't made that jump yet, they can just make that jump now. It's not going to be that. Most people have already made that jump, but because if you do the ChatGPT, you're still going to need a website. You're still going to need. You're probably going to have an app. You're probably going to, people are going to use their phone or use their desktop or their laptop or maybe even an AI device. But will that change? Will that grow the revenue for the company? Most likely not. Because if they're going to purchase, let's say it's Amazon, or a better example would be, let's say Delta Airlines. All right. You could call, the olden days, you would have to call a travel agent, right? Or call, on the phone. Then there was something called the internet. All right. And then people were able to purchase on Delta's website or through Expedia or whatever, all right? Some sort of internet travel agency. So if you're purchasing your tickets, it's either on the website of Delta or through some sort of travel agency, all right? Either a boutique travel agency or like Expedia or something like that. And let's say that you have a relatively fixed population for the next 5 years. And all these companies out there, every single company out there increased it added to their ordering system. You can order their goods or services on ChatGPT. Let's just say in this perfect world, all companies have integrated. Do you think Delta is actually going to have more people purchasing tickets for their plane because ChatGPT? That's what this guy's saying. No. Now let's look at Whole Foods. Do you think people will buy more at Whole Foods because you can order on ChatGPT? No. You may have less people that are actually going to Whole Foods to pick it up. Maybe more deliveries, but will you have more sales? Most likely not. Now compare it to a company, let's say a hardware store. This doesn't, it's a mom and pop shop hardware store, all right? And it's not on the internet, and it's in a small town. And they decide that they're going to go e-commerce. So they open up a website. And they also, this website has ChatGPT ordering too, that you can order through ChatGPT to this hardware store. Would the hardware store's revenues go up? Yes. But how many hardware stores that are mom and pop that don't have an internet, that aren't e-commerce now? Almost all businesses are e-commerce now. So it's not going to be that additive. It's a replacement. The question is like, for example, you started to see it in hardware. When the iPad came out, Apple was looking at how many people were using their laptops. And they noticed that laptop usage started to drop when iPads came out. So the iPad usage went up laptops went down. All right. So that was the use of a device. Now, why was that? Because it's more portable. It's easier. People wanted to consume content, not really create content. All right. Now, if you're ordering and it's e-commerce, right? You can order through the internet. You can order through an app. You can order through, let's say, in the world of ChatGPT, these vendors are integrated. Does it really matter which one you use? Whichever is the most convenient. But the number of users aren't going to change. Why would the number of users change? The pie doesn't grow. Now, if you're a first mover and you want to be, and you're a consumer that wants to, do things differently than everybody else, and you may get more revenue because people are using the ChatGPT for that vendor and a competitor doesn't have it, maybe you might see a little bit of that. But once all the competitors are using it, then it's going to be a price war. So if there is an additive, it is going to be fleeting because of competition. But I don't see it being that big of a deal, because if a company that you're buying a product that's cheaper and you can buy it through an app or through the internet and not ChatGPT versus a competitor that has the ChatGPT app and the website, and you order that, all right, but it's more expensive, which one are you going to go to? You're going to go to the website and just order the less expensive one. So it's not going to grow the pie. I don't see how it can grow the pie. Now, what people have noticed is that individuals stop using because of the screen so small on a phone, they stop using the website, and they may go and use the Whole Foods app. Okay, you may see that less people are using the Whole Foods app and using ChatGPT more. But does that mean more revenue for the company? No. It's just that the means of ordering has changed. Instead of driving to Whole Foods, they now are ordering online. But instead of using a website, now they're using an app. In the future, they may not even use the app, they may use ChatGPT. But did the revenues go up for Whole Foods? No. Did the revenues go up for OpenAI? Yes. Did you get charged more? Most likely. As an end user? Yes. So they're adding friction. That's the big problem here. They're adding friction and trying to fleece the end user. They're adding these nominal costs to it. So when you buy your groceries, do you think Sam Altman should be getting a small little percentage take on it? Because that's what's going to happen. That little snot-nose guy that's running OpenAI that doesn't have that strong ethics. He doesn't have business ethics, because look at what he did. He took a nonprofit and turned it into a profit. He doesn't seem like he is a humanist. He's a transhumanist. You trust a transhumanist? Because if you really pay attention to what's happening here, it's about adding friction and costing the end user, either through a subscription fee or through a nominal fee per transaction. So how do you benefit? How do you benefit? See, when you start using these technologies, you need to say, how am I, the end user, benefiting? And if you're not benefiting, there's to say it's more convenient. Is it really more convenient to use ChatGPT versus an app? Is it? Is it worth making Sam Altman a billionaire so he can scalp a little bit of each transaction? I would say not.
develop better offerings. It's like if you didn't have a website, eventually you got screwed.
You're saying something
You're gonna have
You're
here.
saying it for
All right. So he's basically saying, oh, if you have a company and you don't have if you didn't have a website, you were losing revenue. That's true. That's true. But most companies are e-commerce now. So the question is your e-commerce really going to drop if you're not integrated to the OpenAI? Is it really going to drop? Is it really going to change? Probably not. Because there's so many different modalities that these people can use. An app, a website. Now the thing is that what happens when less people log into the internet and they just voice command it to an AI system and they don't use their phone as often or it's totally eliminated? That's a different story. But we are talking 20 years down the road when that happens. There may be a time where the internet's not used anymore. We just talk it. We talk into the cloud, and the cloud speaks back. Right? It may be, this is an interesting philosophical thought that I have here that I may do another video on. But let me go on a tangent here. What if the philosophers of Greece and their philosophical discussion, especially with Socrates in Plato's Republic, is talking about the perfect city, and eventually it starts talking about the aristocracy going all the way to tyranny. You know, you have the aristocracy, you have the timocracy, the democracy. No, yeah, was it? No, the oligarchs, the democracy, and then tyranny. But then in Plato's Republic, what if that discussion is really trying to talk about something really deep? Because these philosophers, they all were post-destruction of the temple. Post-destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. You have to remember when the Torah, the oral Torah and the written Torah, and Kabbalah came down, that was 1700 BCE. Some scholars say maybe even 1550 BCE, so somewhere in there, all right? But around 1700 BCE was when Mount Sinai happened. And they built the temple, all right? They roamed the desert for 40 years and they eventually King David built the temple. So we're talking about the destruction of the temple is like 900 or something like that BCE. Socrates and Plato, we're talking 490 BCE. Something like that. So there was like 400 years or more that traversed before Socrates, from the destruction of the temple before Socrates. So if you really think about this, some of the thoughts that they were having in the Republic, in Plato's Republic, about the perfect city, they may have been actually trying to describe to people what a messianic era may be. And that if you don't have a perfect city, how it degrades into tyranny. That they were actually discussing something that used to exist. You ever thought about that? That maybe all of the modern wisdom, Western and Eastern wisdom, actually comes from the Mount Sinai? You ever really thought about that? Because the scholars can't, if you take out the revelation of Mount Sinai, you take that out and you look at Western philosophy, all right, you got Socrates, you got the pre-Socrates era, right? But where's it coming from? It's coming from the Middle East. It's coming from this revelation that took place. So, okay. Then the temple is destroyed and there is a lost knowledge. And then you have the Greeks. This is my take on it. The Greeks are now trying to figure this out. And they talk about, virtue and innovation. Well, and this idea of contemplation and innovation, and that maybe you shouldn't innovate because it can cause problems. Make a nuclear bomb, or you learn about nuclear physics and you make something that's harmful. So maybe you shouldn't innovate. But they also have this discussion that's going on that perhaps when you do innovate, that there's really nothing that's really new. There's nothing new under the sun, as what I think Solomon said. And this whole idea of the philosopher king, doesn't that sound like Solomon? King Solomon? The most wise individual ever to live? So it's almost like they're trying to rediscover something that was lost. And they're thinking it through. And they talk about this innovation. And this innovation will eventually circle itself to the original. That you're innovating, building up knowledge, you're understanding the universe, and all of a sudden, it all snaps back to an understanding that took place 1700 BCE. This is what the Western philosophers were contemplating. So I went on a tangent there, and I'm not even sure why I went on a tangent. Oh, so you have devices. You have devices that are being used, the phone, right? That have been, and the internet, we may not use anymore. And we're just speaking to the AI. And the AI ends up becoming a robot, a humanoid. And now we're talking, and then you start going back to the Greek philosophers when they're starting to talk about, well, what does it mean to be human? Well, if you're surrounded by humanoids, that is a very important philosophical question that most people will be asking. But it took so many thousands of years to be able to get to this point, to get to the same questions that Socrates was asking. What does it mean to be virtuous? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have a good life? What does it mean what does it mean to understand truth when you're living in a whole world of artificial? What does it mean to have that ideal city? And when you start adding in things in the Republic through Plato, you start seeing how society starts to degrade. So these ancient thoughts, these ancient philosophical thoughts, are literally contemplating things that are happening now. Now. So you step back and go, is it really? Okay, so we have people not logging into the internet as often in the future, not using their phones. Maybe they get rid of their phones. They're using devices that are ubiquitous, non-intrusive AI that's tied into the cloud. All right? You don't even have electrical lines to charge devices. It's just using magnetic waves. I mean, think about it. If you can have a Bluetooth, think about this for a second. If you can have a Bluetooth, right, that can pulse a motor, and that motor can move based on an instruction from Bluetooth or some sort of frequency, and it's moving. then by it moving, it can charge the device. So you no longer have wires. You do have electricity, but it's used differently. Now, some people would say maybe you're getting into the whole 0-point energy thing and all this, but but the thing is that there's ways seemingly to be able to charge devices where you're not plugged into a wall. Well, when you make these devices smaller, you're dealing with a world you're dealing with devices that are non-intrusive. And they're ubiquitous. And when you're using these types of devices, it's almost like you're now living in a pre-internet day. You're living in a pre-computer age day, even though everything around you is computerized. You just don't know. You just don't. You don't. It's not. Let's say, for example, you have a bionic eye. I'm against transhumanism, but let's say you have a bionic eye. Do you really need a TV anymore? You would just get the radio frequency or some sort of frequency into the bionic eye, and you see the TV, or you see the internet. So will we need computers in the future? No. Will we still have a computerized age? Yes. But would you be able to distinguish it from pre-computer age? No. You won't be able to distinguish it. Because it'll get so good that it's like nature. It's a mimic of nature. All right. Apologize for digressing there.
On ChatGPT, it's not going to double its market share. It's just maybe Expedia, because people probably, if you could just.
In terms of going back to the finances, who will benefit is ChatGPT. They're trying to get revenue from the enterprise, subscription revenue from the end user, and potentially even nominal transactional fees of all your purchases. And then maybe sell your data too on the top of it. Now, for convenience, at this moment in time, we can opt out because we can order things on the internet, on apps. You can go to the store. But what happens when you don't have those and you can't opt out and you have to be plugged into Sam Altman's singularity ordering system? There's the problem.
Hotel room, maybe I don't know.
Well, then what Expedia has to do is make sure that people go to Expedia and they say, this is where I want to go, and this is my budget. Put together the package for me. And by the way, they're doing that. They have this product called Expedia Romy. Priceline has something called Priceline Penny. All these companies have to create these agents. You need to create an agent in order to be successful.
And where do you land on the vendor financing piece of this, the sort of round tripping?
It's getting tricky. I'm not sure how I come out of there's not red flags here, but there's some orange flags. And you better be careful about who you've set up your vendor financing deals with. There's a few companies where it should be relatively safe. I think OpenAI is. I think they've got access. I don't know any. I think they've got almost limitless access to capital at this point. They maintain the kind of growth that they're doing, and if they're rolling out the products that they're rolling out are extraordinarily good. Soar 2, for example, and we're going to have, I know Brad Gersman's coming on a little bit. I was just chatting with him. I mean, ChatGPT 6 is coming out before the end of the year, and I just think we're going to see these step function improvements in the product. If you do that, and you're in the OpenAI ecosystem,
I don't know. All right, we're going to talk about Mamdani a little bit, but before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. These are very high quality soaps. You should be using them every day, but especially for the fall and winter. Why? Because they're high quality soaps that have structural nano silver. Now, charcoal tea tree, lemongrass, very high quality. You can also get the peppermint and lavender. Get a few bars for your household. Help support the work that I do. and help support your health and wellness. And I think that if you really think about what I was saying about Plato's Republic and what does it mean, in terms of living in an artificial world, in an artificial intelligence world, yeah, at the very beginning it may be beneficial, but eventually it starts to clamp down on your freedoms. It's a surveillance technology. I mean, I used to be an automotive engineer, all right? And I'll tell you what, when you look at these cars, right, most of the dashboard with these flat screens, especially in the center cockpit module, it's an inorganic design. It doesn't even flow right into the dashboard. And it has all these electronics that if it goes bad, what do? Who's going to fix it? There's something about the aesthetic of the old, right? And it's cheaper. You get these cars that should be only $25,000, $30,000, sell them for $75,000. Why? Because it has all this electronics crap in it that you really don't need. So I do see that there's going to be an age where people will want to strip it down. They'll want to go back to a cool looking, but almost retro interior. Fresh surfaces, but retro interior. Non-technical interior. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with the health of your gum line, bring down inflammation of the gum line. It has no fluoride. You should use this every day. It's a very high quality toothpaste, but especially for the fall and the winter. Why? Because it neutralizes. And you're gonna want that. If you're not feeling well during the fall and the winter, or someone around you is not feeling well, you better get prepared, because the fall and winter in the United States is not gonna be pretty. All right, let's listen to Mamdani here.
Momentum, acceleration, embrace the pursuit. David Yurman Chevron Collection.
Bamboo HR is easy for everyone. What about a hospital that needs employee data, benefits, and payroll all in the same place?
Yes. So the Democratic Socialists of America, which is the group, the largest group that's backing Mamdani to run for the mayor of New York City, they're brushing off Israel's ceasefire with Hamas. They called for more resistance to Israel's apartheid and occupation of Gaza. They released a statement on their website. It says, "This will not end Israel's assault on the Palestinian people or the theft and occupation of Palestinian lands. The occupied West Bank and Jerusalem, eroding under illegal shelter expansion, continue to struggle under violent Israeli apartheid and occupation."
So that is the group that finances, and it's a platform he's running on. So Mamdani's ceasefire statement isn't much better. Since there is finally a glimmer of hope that this ceasefire will hold, the long, difficult work of reconstruction can begin. We must work towards a future built upon justice, one without occupation and apartheid, really, and for a world where every person can live with safety and dignity. He had a terrible statement on the October 7th, marking that day, and this isn't much better. Apartheid still brings that up.
So I used to cover Democratic Socialists of America because they were often linked with the campus groups all over the country. And I went on their website. I used to think of the Democratic Socialists of America as Bernie and AOC. They have totally changed. The faces, if you go to the website right now, you see Zohran Mamdani and you see Rashida Tlaib. And you see all these causes for justice for Palestine. It's not just about economics, wealth redistribution to fund the police. They're a free Palestine group right now. This is dangerous, what they believe in. It's anti-American, and it's very clear the anti-Semitic tropes that they continue to shout.
Well, there are some individuals here in New York that have condemned this. You have New York City Councilwoman
Ina Bernikov, who is Jewish. She lashed out at Mamdani soon afterward, calling his statement a word salad and noting the absence of any mention of Hamas or its crimes. You have Andrew Cuomo, the former governor who is running against Mamdani for mayor, noted how long it took the Democratic Socialist candidate to address the ceasefire. He says his silence speaks volumes. And there's also criticism of Mamdani's wife because she publicly mourned the death of a Palestinian social media influencer who was praising Hamas's actions on October 7th.
Right, and his ideas are ridiculous. They said that if he's going to put ahead things like free buses, it's going to cost the city $800 million. And he doesn't even have control over eliminating that. His proposals are really idiotic, and the socialist principles will not work. And the things that he wants to do, mayors don't even have the power to do. But that's who they say has a nice smile, and he's going to be on with that smile on the story at 3 p.m. today.
You won't be smiling if his policies are implemented, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's going to be on with Martha McCallum, and she's going to come up on Fox and Friends to preview that.
They have a debate tomorrow. Curtis Lewa, it's one and only. Curtis Lewa, Andrew Cuomo, I think it's one and only, and Mamdani together. That's going to be must-see TV. Yep. And also, Eric Adams says he's considering endorsing Cuomo. So if that's another 10%, that's another 10%.
A Democratic Socialist group that is backing Zoran Mamdani, his run for mayor, is condemning the Gaza ceasefire, saying, quote, "This will not end Israel's assault on the Palestinian people or the theft and occupation of the Palestinian lands. The occupied West Bank and Jerusalem eroding under illegal shelter or settler expansion continue to struggle under violent Israeli apartheid and occupation."
Meanwhile, Mamdani is facing criticism for posting something similar, saying there is finally a glimmer of hope that this ceasefire will hold and the long, difficult work of reconstruction can begin. We must work toward a future built upon justice, one without occupation and apartheid, and for a world where every person can live with safety and dignity.
Apartheid, nice. Let's bring in the host and executive editor of the story, Martha McCallum.
Good morning, guys.
Hey, Martha.
Big interview today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We've been wanting him to come over here and talk to us at Fox for quite some time, so we're looking forward to having him this afternoon.
What's going to be your approach?
Well, they have a huge debate tomorrow night, and he's going to be grilled on a lot of the issues that we have just been bringing up. Obviously, there's news things that are happening with regard to Gaza that you guys are just reporting, and we'd like to get his feedback on that. Also, I think we want to talk about public safety. We want to talk about the economy, the things that are really compelling and will be the work that he has in front of him if he's elected. He's ahead by 13 points right now. So, obviously, Cuomo is hoping that this is going to be a big night to shift this dynamic. 13 points apart right now. Sliwa will try to take a crack at it tomorrow night as well. But, sometimes debates can be game changers. So this is where the focus will be.
Yeah, if you look at the big board behind you, Martha, this is the Democratic Socialists of America. This is their agenda. They're his biggest supporters. Get rid of mandatory minimum prison sentences, close ICE detention facilities, give health insurance to illegal immigrants. And the chapter leader said, quote, "Our endorsed candidates are expected to follow the will of the membership."
That's exactly right. And, you look at AOC, you look at Bernie Sanders, you look at Mamdani, they want to be the future of politics in New York City and beyond. This is the largest capitalist center in the world.
Think about it.
New York
Think
City.
about it. Think about it. What did Plato say in the Republic? Through democracy, you got to remember what a democracy really is. We really have a constitutional republic at the federal level, but if you have the will of the people, right, eventually it will degrade and go into tyranny. Aren't we seeing that, the beginnings of it in New York City? Now, New York is 400 years old. Or is it 400? It's around 400 years old. Is it more than that? No, it's 400. Yeah, it's 400 years old. So the thing is that it's taken 400 years, and now we're just about ready to have a tyrannical rule.
So one of the big questions, I think, is how do you go about running that from this kind of position? Also, you have people who are very concerned about their safety. I talked to young people around, asking them what their thoughts are, because he has a huge central base of young people. He's also managed to bring over some of the people who were sort of open to Trump, working class voters in Queens and Astoria and some of these places, South Asian voters that he's really catered to. So he has a lot of questions to answer. He's very young, doesn't have a lot of experience running things. So those are some of the things that we're going to focus on. But safety is huge. And you look at every week there's another horrific story. Right. And you ask yourself, how was this person on the street? So I think that's one of the things we want to focus on.
We have a difficult task too, Mark, because this is the interview we all been waiting for. He puts his policy prescription, he has all these past comments, and then his campaign will release a statement saying, okay, he doesn't quite mean that. Or he'll say, I want to clarify. But then his Achilles heel, he goes back to those same policy positions. So do you think you're going to be able to get a clear answer, whatever he believes on it? We just want a clear answer on that.
Well, that's what we're going to try to do. Politicians do evolve, and he's saying that I have changed my opinions on these things. You think about what he said about New York City police officers, racist, anti-queer, and part of the public safety problem in the city. He has said he no longer believes that, and he has said that he will apologize to the police at large and to the city at large for those comments. So, I think without getting too far down the road and where we want to go.
Don't raise your voice to prove your rights. Focus your mind with every word of irrefutable fact you can find. Because conviction is the calm that comes when you know that you really do know.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, before the tyranny starts in New York City, and get the digestive enzyme complex. Why? You need the digestive enzyme complex to help with your pancreas. Why? Because the digestive enzyme complex will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. And therefore, there's less stress on the pancreas. And it helps you to digest. So it's less stress on your digestive system. It also has bromelain. Bromelain helps to break up clots. And it has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. This is going to be really important in the fall and the winter. Trust me. Olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract will bring down inflammation and help you to control your lipid profile. So olive leaf extract is going to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will help with your immune system. Magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3, and magnesium and zinc will help with brain function. Super important. And I can find it. There it is. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin, your brain function, and your immune system. So stack the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. Take it every day, and it'll help to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system and your brain function. But especially take it during the fall and the winter to boost up that immune system. So a great stack is the following. The vitamin C and magnesium for the immune system and your skin and your brain function. Magnesium and zinc for immune system and brain function. Olive leaf extract to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular health, and digestive enzyme complex to help with your pancreas. So please go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Go to my website. The link is in the description of this video. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen in to Bloomberg.
They happen in the U.S. There's one thing that we've done in this country, and most notably through ethanol, Scarlett, is we create a net energy exporter. We create more enough energy. A lot of it's because we use our food for fuel. Now, to put that in context, before the adaptation, the proliferation of automobile, a lot of our crops was used for transportation to feeding animals, so horses. So it's just coming back around. But the significance is we have major pressure on U.S. soybean prices because of massive supply to Brazil. And China's world's largest demand for source of soybeans are taking Brazilian soybeans. So in the U.S., we're looking for sources of demand. How about biofuels? My uncle, who's a farmer, Dennis Shannon, used to like to say, you could put soybean oil straight into your diesel tractor at 5% and run it no problem. So it's a great source. And so that's why soybean oil this year is up about 27%. Soybeans are flat, soybean meal's down about 10%. We just need more demand pull for our soybeans. And maybe that means we can use that soybeans rather than some of this renewable fuel from, used cooking oil from China.
So if we're having good crops, good soybean crops here in the U.S., and China's not buying it, what's that mean for our farmers?
Pressure's lower. It's really hurting farmers right now. So they had the best of all worlds. Unfortunately, after Russia invaded Ukraine, pumped prices very high, created a lot of profits, 22, 23, a little 24. Now they're really getting hammered. Prices are going down because they're creating more with less every day. We just brought in all that extra supply. It incentivized a lot of supply out of South America. So they're getting hammered out, and they're looking for sources. Trump administrations started to help them. But right now we have corn around $4 a bushel. Probably has to stay low for a while. Unfortunately, the average cost of production is around $3.70. We have soybeans around $10 a bushel. Probably has to stay a little lower. Unfortunately, shut off those excesses of supply, and that's the problem. Farmers are getting hurt now with these low prices.
Which is so interesting, given that they're such a big constituent of President Trump, and he's talked a lot about making sure that they're taken care of. Mike, Paul had talked about how you are the go-to guy for all things gold, silver, as well as Bitcoin. So I wanted to get your take on what's going on in crypto, because we're a few days removed from that big crypto crash on Friday and Saturday. And things are settling it down a little bit here, but we are seeing Bitcoin slide for a second straight day. What kind of damage has that crash done to the space overall?
Scarlett, I appreciate you mentioning it, because in June I wrote about Bitcoin and cryptos could lead the next U.S. recession by going down and creating a reverse wealth effect. And I reiterated that today. Bitcoin has 1929-like qualities right now. It looks like it's heading lower with massive excess supply in cryptos. There was one in 2009, and now based on CoinMarketCap.com, there's 25 million. A lot of excesses. It looks like they're starting to hit lower. So the key thing I've been watching over time, really like to watch, is the ratio of ounces of gold per Bitcoin. A high this year was around 38. Now it's ticking down around 26. Our model, Josh Daniels on our team says, here's a model. Looks like the average price could be around 15. Means it could still cut in half versus gold. And here's the key thing to remember. There's 25 million cryptocurrencies on limited supply, and there's only 4 precious metals. Gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, and the average of precious metals this year up about 60 to 70%. That could continue. Limited supply, more demand, massive excess supply of cryptocurrencies, and just a little bit too much speculation.
Good stuff. As always, Mike, you break it down for us so we can understand it. Mike McGlone, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Commodity Strategist. He covers everything from pork bellies to Bitcoin. Go figure. But he is our go-to person on all things commodities. Let's head down to Washington, D.C. Here, our own Michael McKee is there, international economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg News. Mike, we heard from Fed Chairman Jay Powell yesterday. He made some comments. What stood out to you in a world where we hear from Fed people kind of all the time?
I think the real bottom line here is that the Fed chairman is saying we're going to cut rates on October 29th. And that's important because this is the last week before the Fed blackout. We still have more Fed people to hear from, but if you know the chair is going for the 25 basis point cut, then you pretty much know what is going to happen. And he gave us no reason to think that the markets are mispriced for that at this point.
Okay, makes sense. And that's why we did see stocks give up a lot of their losses yesterday. The S&P 500 still did close in the red, but not by a whole lot. Looking at data, there's no government official data due out right now because of the shutdown, but we did get Empire Manufacturing, which is New York manufacturing. And that was a surprise because it was a positive number when economists were looking for a negative print.
There have been a number of surprises recently in some economic indicators that are private sector. Even the ISM's better than expected, even if the manufacturing number was down. What we're seeing, I think, is a little bit of a fall rebound coming after we saw the summer slowdown. Now, the question is, how much does that affect both inflation and jobs? Is it just that there's a little bit more business, a few more orders? Or are companies hiring? And that's the problem. We're not seeing that at this point. And so the Fed remains concerned about what's going to happen. And as we heard from Chair Powell yesterday, they think that the labor market is a bit more of a problem than inflation, which is still going up.
Talk to us about inflation, Mike. How do you really think about it? Because just to me, I thought inflation, there's a good argument that it could have been materially higher than what we're seeing right now, simply a result of the tariffs and maybe some pass-through mechanism from
the economic supply chain, but not really seeing it that much. Is this just a question of timing, or is it just a one-time reset?
Well, it's a little bit of both. At this point, timing matters because the president's application of tariffs has been spread out over a long period. We didn't really get the whole world tariff going until August, and so we're seeing some bleed through in that into inflation now, and probably that is going to pick up. That's the Fed's expectation. We're also seeing some countries cut prices a little bit, not a whole lot. I think the biggest thing for economists is that we haven't seen tariffs like this since the 1930s. And so when they tried to model it, they put in the idea that we would see all of these effects at once and at a much higher level, because that was the original April presidential declaration. And then the president has carved out a lot of exceptions. He's cut down on the tariff levels for a number of countries, and we've implemented them over a period of time. So the models haven't given us an accurate picture of what's going to happen. And basically, everybody's just sitting back now and waiting to see how this bleeds through and how long it's going to take. Inflation's going to go up from tariffs, but we don't have a good handle on how much or how fast.
And very quickly, before we let you go, Mike, just an update here on the U.S. Support for Argentina and its currency. The president now adding that some of the support is conditional.
Yes, that's a key point, because Javier Milei has midterm elections coming up in a week or so, and if they lose control of the Argentine legislature, then it's going to be impossible for him to pass his legislative reforms that he wants, and therefore the president says it's not worth investing in Argentina because they're still going to be losing money, and they're still probably a candidate for default with the IMF. And if he does win, if this helps him to win, then the president says the U.S. could go ahead with the $20 billion, whatever it is. We're not exactly clear how that works, whether it's money to Argentina, whether it's loans, whether it's guarantees. It isn't very clear, but it looks like we're going to have to wait a couple of weeks until the Argentine election to find out.
Michael McKee, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
My understanding is a swap between the Treasury Department, which basically means they're going to take pesos and the Treasury is going to give dollars at the current exchange rate, and they will reverse the swap later. I don't know how many years later, at the same rate. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. The Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, and passion flower that will help you to get into 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. So that will help for you to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and to be well rested. When you have a good sleep regularly, you actually slow down the aging process and you're healthier. So please go to my store and get the Goodnight Formula. Take it every night, drink it with filtered water. Vitamin B complex. This is a great supplement to boost up your mitochondria. The first 4 B vitamins helps with the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain boosts up your ATP so you have more energy at the cellular level. When you have more energy at the cellular level, your tissues perform better. Also, your metabolism will improve with the vitamin B complex, and it'll help to protect your neurons. Super important, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. Myotrol helps to build muscle and to maintain muscle. When you get older, your gene expression changes. This is the reason why it's harder to gain muscle and to maintain muscle. So do resistance training, have a proper diet and exercise, and take Myotrol to build muscle and to maintain muscle. This helps with the gene expression. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression and to boost up the health of your mitochondria. If you're 40 years of age, male or female, do some resistance training and take Myotrol. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from Myotrol. So take it if you're also an athlete. Omega-3 brings down inflammation, helps with your lipid profile, and reduces the stickiness of your red blood cells. Super important to take to help with cardiovascular health. So a great stack to help with your cardiovascular health, get the omega-3. To add in an increase in your metabolism and to protect your neurons, get the vitamin B complex. To help with building muscle and maintaining muscle, get the myotrol. And to help with sleep and brain function, get the Good Night formula. Please go to my store, use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. Make sure you click the link. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, looks like there was a potential Tomahawk missile targeting Russia. So let's listen to General Jack Keane.
Hamas, and if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently.
This peace process, the rebuilding, which really amounts to the rebuilding process, is going to have some major stumbling blocks. If you don't have the security, you can't rebuild. That's basically the bottom line here.
With that, let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane. General, thanks for being here. You know, the president went to Truth Social and he said the job is not done. All 20 hostages are back and feeling as good as can be expected. A big burden has been lifted, but the job is not done. The dead have not been returned as promised. Phase 2 begins right now. President DJT. They know this is a heavy lift. The second part.
Yeah, I mean, it really is challenging. Certainly getting Hamas to release all the hostages as to a partial release, that was a major deal in itself. But the second phase is considerably more challenging for a couple of reasons. The primary one is Hamas, to make the deal, said that yes, they would disarm, yes, they would give up governance. But also at the press conference in the White House, when the deal was announced, the president made a statement that if Hamas reneged on disarmament, then he would permit the IDF, ordered by Prime Minister Netanyahu, to go back in and finish it. I think the International Stabilization Force would try to do that first. But for our audience to understand, peace enforcement forces only work when both sides are cooperating. There's been a UN peace enforcement force in Lebanon for 2 decades, and Hezbollah has moved south every single year to do something against Israel, and they've never stopped them. So likely the card that would have to be played would be the IDF and Netanyahu going back in there to do that, and that's what really the president's talking about.
All right, let's turn to another topic. AP, Russian aerial attack hits Ukrainian hospital. This is just days before President Zelensky arrives here in the White House, launching. The Russians did a powerful glide bombs and drones against Ukraine's second largest city in overnight attacks, hitting a hospital, wounding 7 people. We've seen these attacks and the increase. President Trump talked about possibly using Tomahawk missiles on Monday. Take a listen.
They need Patriots very badly. They need Patriots very badly. They'd like to have Tomahawks. That's a step up. They'd like to have Tomahawks. We talked about that. I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in that direction? I don't think so. I might say, look, if this war's not going to get settled, I'm going to send them Tomahawks. I may send them.
Sending Tomahawks to the Ukrainians, which they're requesting to strike deeper into Russia.
Well, let's just talk about that for a second. Putin is saying that's an escalation. That's another false statement. This guy has made one false statement after another. In 22, Putin began to fire hypersonic ballistic missiles against Ukraine, largely civilian targets. He's been firing air-launched and sea-launched cruise missiles against civilian targets and energy infrastructure for the last 2+ years, in addition to those 500 to 600 drones a night that you're seeing there. He's the guy that escalated. All of his targets are largely civilian targets. If the Ukrainians get the Tomahawk missiles, what are they going to use them for? Their number one target will be the Abaluga manufacturing center for Shahed missiles, built by Ukraine. 20,000 North Koreans are there at that manufacturing center, Brett. It's out of the range of everything they have right now. That'll be target one, but they'll all be military targets. Ukraine is not going to target civilian targets. And what Putin is trying to do with President Trump is the same thing he successfully did with Biden. Threaten escalation if you do X, and there'll be something to come against you as a result of it. And he won that bluff.
with Biden time and time again. I don't think he'll win it with President Trump.
You know, Zelensky expressed hope in the wake of what he saw in Gaza that this could lead to something else. Geopolitically, with a win like we saw in the Middle East for President Trump, does that affect Russia? Does that affect China and how they look at things?
Oh, absolutely. Just as weakness affects them, the fact that they become so aggressive during the previous administration is because they believed the American leadership was weak and they could take advantage of it. And the facts spoke to that as well. The attack that President Trump ordered on the nuclear sites, the decisive blow, got their attention. And so, in Iran. And what is happening right here now with the somewhat defeat of Iran and the proxies and moving forward to peace and stability in the region, all engineered by who? American leadership on a world stage, setting the whole standard for what's to be accomplished. This is what they're trying to depose. They want that, have that influence. And here we have a president doing it. You betcha they're paying attention.
I want to talk about the Pentagon and covering the Pentagon. There are these new stipulations, new rules that have been put out, and we, in the media, along with all the networks and also newspapers, had a media statement to respond. It was due today, and here it is. Today, we join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' abilities to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. Policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press. That's ABC News, CBS News, CNN, Fox News Media, and NBC News signing that. Here is the Secretary of War at the cabinet meeting in his interpretation of what all this means.
You have to wear a badge that identifies that you're press, or you can't just roam anywhere you want. It used to be, Mr. President, the press could go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the Pentagon. The most classified area in the world. Or also that if they sign on to the credentialing, they're not going to try to get soldiers to break the law by giving classified information. So it's common sense stuff.
Kind of simplified it there than what's on the paper. I covered the Pentagon for 6.5 years. I covered the White House for 4 years. I covered the Pentagon when you were there.
Yeah.
And we knew not to, you don't walk into the tank, and the classified areas are off limits. We obviously were always trying to get the story from different elements, and there was a freedom, but everybody had badges with them. At the White House, I never walked into the Oval Office or the Situation Room. These are stipulations that essentially are changing the dynamic about how to get.
The question is, when was he working at the Pentagon? Wasn't it during the Gulf War, or was it during the Afghan-Iraq War, right after 9/11? Because if it was, they wanted the press there to push the propaganda. Totally different. Totally different. I think it's, I don't know when he was a journalist over at the Pentagon, but I would not be surprised it had something to do with during George Bush. It must have been right after 9/11, because I think Brett is too young to be a correspondent at the Pentagon during the Gulf War. I could be wrong.
And how they disseminate information.
He's comparing apples and oranges.
It doesn't seem like the whole story is being told to our viewers here. What they're really doing, they want to spoon feed information to the journalists, and that will be their story. That's not journalism. Journalism is going out and finding the story and getting all the facts to support it. And no one's going to walk in and bang on a door of a four-star general or senior civilian policy leader in the Pentagon. I never had that, but I did have journalists chasing a story of something that was going on.
The thing is that
those things were legit.
Yeah, but back then, when the time period that they're talking about, they wanted the journalists to promote the propaganda. All right. I mean, the journalists were the ones that convinced the American people to go to war with Iraq and Afghanistan right after 9/11. Who was beating the drum of war? It was the mainstream media. All right, okay, so it's a different time period. But even more important, Hegseth is trying to restructure the Pentagon. and reduce their inefficiencies. So it's going to ruffle the feathers of some generals and some staff members. So if you have a bunch of reporters roaming around, you're going to have a lot of gossip talking from the generals and the staff complaining about what Hegseth is trying to do to restructure the Pentagon, which is what the will of the people want. People voted for Trump to change the Pentagon. So he needs to tighten up the ship to make sure there's no loose cannons. And the best way to do that, have a watchful eye on the press to stop the infighting. Oh, that's pretty genius.
And if anything, what would frustrate us in times is we didn't beat you to it. And something bad is happening, and we're getting our act together to do it. And sometimes, well, let's wait a couple of days before we talk about that, and you guys are on it. And that's journalism.
And we know the stipulations, right?
But what happens when you have a bunch of complaining generals because they're either going to get axed because they're too fat and they can't do push-ups, or they're getting their programs cut? Think about a lot of the programs that are happening are inefficient at the Pentagon. We waste American taxpayer money on stuff that we don't need, that are not effective, that are not robust. But it'll make a lot of money for a certain contractor, defense contractor. Why do we need so many derivatives of the F-35? Why? We don't. But defense contractors will make a ton of money, and every general wants their special project. Well, when you cut them, don't you think the generals are going to complain? And if there's a bunch of CNN reporters walking down the hallway, don't you think they're going to say, "Oh, they're going to be cutting this, and I got a scoop for you because I am pissed off. I'm a pissed off general, and I want to get back at Hegseth." So to stop the infighting, he has to get the journalists out because he's doing a major restructuring of the Pentagon. And the Pentagon has a lot of nefarious things that are happening. The special projects, the golden parachutes, the insubordination that's taking place. Barack Obama was saying that there was insubordination with the Pentagon. He had problems having the generals do what he wanted them to do. And based on our Constitution, it's the fucking President of the United States. Even if you don't like him, the President of the United States tells the military what the fuck to do, not the generals. And I didn't even like Obama. But Obama was right. The commander-in-chief is the President of the United States, not the generals. There's the problem. There's the problem. So if you need to stop the infighting and the leaks, you gotta clamp down on the press at the Pentagon. So that's the story.
Classified information, and if there are leaks or there are situations, there are investigations many times that lead to that. But in the day-to-day, for military families, for military, us being in the Pentagon is usually an asset.
Yeah, I have never ever seen it. I mean,
it's only an asset. It's only an asset. It's only an asset when you want to control the population for the drumbeat of war.
I insisted that all our new brigadier generals get a class a few days on what the role of the media is in an American democracy. These are often new generals. And then I wanted them to practice.
I'm so tired. I'm so tired of people saying an American democracy. I don't even know what the hell that is. It's a constitutional republic, totally different. American democracy. What? A democracy would destroy our Constitution because it's a will of the masses. And when the will of the masses are stupid, don't you think that they're going to destroy property rights? Look at what Mamdani's doing in New York City. He's literally destroying property rights. If he wins, the mayoralship in New York City, property rights will be diminished. But the will of the people brought him in. That's the reason why our founding fathers wrote the Constitution, to ensure property rights, because they knew that the masses will get upset and want to take property. So to control that, you have a rule of law where property is protected from the masses. We don't have a democracy. There is no democracy. It is a constitutional republic, which is far superior to a democracy.
Realities of this, because they have all these incredible warfighting skill sets, but dealing with the media isn't one of them. And so the education of them was very important to me, so they would welcome and don't see the media as something to be intimidated by. See the media as your conduit to the American people. And that's how I always saw it and believed in supporting it. There were times when stories were done that make me flinch a little bit. Yeah. But that's usually because we had done something that wasn't as good as we should have done it.
Well, we're all standing in solidarity, almost all of us, and we hope that changes. We'll see where this policy goes. General, as always, thank you.
Yeah, great talking to you, bro.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interview.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. It's important to take this every day. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue. Drink filtered water. Do it every day. And what will happen is your immune system, your endocrine system will perform better. Even your brain function. So take it every day and improve that immune system. Super important, especially in the fall and the winter. Clarity Factor, a great neurostack. It gets rid of brain fog. It allows you to concentrate, and over time will improve your thinking. It'll speed your cognition and improve your memory. Over time, especially when you're drinking with filtered water and doing proper diet and exercise, taking the Clarity Factor is going to connect your neurons. The dendritic connections will increase. You're going to get this positive neuroplasticity, and you're going to be thinking faster, and your memory will improve. So please go to my store, get the Clarity Factor, take it every day. It's super important. Resveratrol, I've been taking this for decades. This will help for youthful gene expression. It's going to get rid of cells that are in senescence. It'll help with the health of your mitochondria, boost up your energy levels, and soak up free radicals to reduce stress in the cell. Your cells will perform better. This will also improve your basal layer for your skin, so you look younger, all right? Resveratrol is very powerful if you stack it with C60 or NAD+ or ubiquinol. So please go to my store and get the Resveratrol, very high quality. Take it every day. And get the deodorants that I have on my store. I partnered up with Rainbow Herbals, and we've developed these deodorants for males and females. You can get it in citrus, and you can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. They have no baking soda, no aluminum. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Extremely powerful ingredients that will allow you to smell good. It's a great deodorant, but it'll also help to detoxify your body. And when you're detoxifying your body daily, your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better. So please go to my store and get the deodorants, and you can stack. Get the deodorants, get the Resveratrol for youthful gene expression, for a great neurostack, get the Clarity Factor, and to also help to detoxify your body, get the Zeolite. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Click the link in the description. Go to the website and get the great products. Get healthy, especially boost up that immune system for the fall and the winter season. All righty, let's listen into Bloomberg.
on Bloomberg Television and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We are seeing a renewed wave of dip buying, and equities are extending gains after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suggested the possibility of a longer China tariff truce tied specifically to rare earths. So here's where we stand. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ off session highs, but still very much in the green, with the S&P up 37, now up by 0.6%. Dow Industrials are advancing by 128 on. The Dow up now by about 0.3%, and NASDAQ higher by 0.8%. The Russell 2000 index, the outperformer today, actually performing in line right now up by about 0.9%. We've got the 10-year 4.00%, with the 2-year 3.48%. Gold up $51 the ounce, $41.94 on the precious metal, up 1.2%. Silver with a 52 handle again, 52.66. Silver up 2.4%. And a retreat for crude, 58.44 right now on WTI, down 0.4%. Morgan Stanley stock traders soared past expectations in the third quarter. Morgan Stanley shares, they are advancing today. Right now, we got Morgan Stanley gained by 5.5%. Bank of America's third quarter earnings beat estimates. Bank of America up now by 5.4%. So what about the banking outlook going forward? Cheryl Page is Senior Portfolio Manager at Angel Oak Capital. She was the guest moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Intelligence.
You know, I think positioning into the quarter, we like the large caps a lot. I think there's probably more of the deregulation angle that hits the large caps more specifically. But as we look forward to lower rate environment, I think the steeper yield curve, lower rate theme is underappreciated in the regional banks. And it may be time for a pivot into regional from large cap from here.
Cheryl Page of Angel Oak Capital. Speaking of regional banks, this morning we did hear from PNC, stock down now by 2.7%. Recapping, S&P higher by 0.5%, and for on-demand news 24 hours a day. Subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Paul Sweeney and Scarlett Fu here on Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio. We're streaming live on YouTube. And, for all the talk of all these companies involved in AI deals, circular deals where they're teaming up with someone and they're buying something or investing in something and partnering with something to buy their own chips back, one company is noticeably absent from all these announcements, and that is a big one. It's Apple.
Yes.
Where is it?
I don't know.
They have a lot of cash.
They do. I don't know. I don't know their AI play. That's what I don't know.
Well, their AI doesn't work very well on their phone right now. I can tell you that. Anurag Rana is a tech analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, and he joins us now from Chicago. So, Anurag, there are some headlines here that Apple is looking to beef up its smart home offerings, lessen its dependence on China. This is something that the president of the United States has been pushing Apple to do, to bring some of its manufacturing back to the U.S. But Apple's not doing that. It is beefing up its manufacturing operations in Vietnam. What's going on with Apple?
See, when you look at it, whether it's accessories or putting together the phones, you really cannot do that in the US. We don't have the size factories or automation to do that. So you will have to do that somewhere in Asia. And as they're diversifying away from China because of the obvious threat between US and China trade wars, Vietnam is a proper location where they can assemble, let's say, some accessories or smaller products where, they may cost you $100 or $50, but they have the low-cost area to produce them or I would say assemble them.
So Anurag, we've spent the last 2, 3, 4 weeks speaking with you, speaking with Mandeep, speaking with other tech experts about all these deals around the AI ecosystem that we've seen. $10 billion here, $100 billion there. Companies ranging from Microsoft to AMD to NVIDIA to OpenAI. We have not talked about Apple. And I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. I don't know if these deals are good or bad. I just know there are a lot of them. They're coming out of the woodwork. There's big numbers. And Apple's just conspicuous by its absence, it feels like. How do you think about it?
Yeah, you could look at it both ways. One way is you criticize that they are not really at the forefront of the next generation model out there. But the other way you can say is, let everybody else fight it out. In the end, if you go to the one that has the best model and include that in there its own distribution channel, which is basically iOS. We have heard from Markham, and he's done some really good work on this particular aspect of it, is the next version of Siri may have technology from some of the third-party providers, whether that's OpenAI, Anthropic, or even Gemini. Our bet is that, we hope that they go with Gemini because they already get a lot of money from Google for the search business. Maybe there is some revenue sharing on that part as well. So we think eventually, we don't know when, they will get it right when it comes to AI infusing in their product, but it's going to come with some third party rather than in-house AI.
So in other words, they're kind of waiting for the dust to settle, waiting for winners to emerge before picking their horse and riding it. Is that something other device makers, handset makers are doing as well? I mean, Alphabet doesn't have to do that because it has its own AI business and it makes handsets.
Yeah, and it's very well integrated because it's the Google Gemini, it's part of Android, and then Samsung is going to license that. So they are all set on that particular aspect of it. But it's possible that Apple may choose to work with Gemini, Google itself again, get their technology, infuse it in their products, and you and I get the same experience we would get, on like, for example, using ChatGPT or Anthropic. I think from what we have heard from Mark is the research right now is they're running parallel chatbots internally, trying to see which one has a better output. And eventually we know with Apple, it's going to go with the one, the highest quality of searches or queries or answers. And let's hope that they get it around in the March timeframe that it's rumored to come out.
Earnings for the tech companies are going to be in a couple of weeks here. What should we be focusing on this quarter, Anurag?
So we're bifurcating the entire tech space into two buckets. One is area where we're going to see some weakness. That's going to be more on the consulting side, more on your traditional software side. And on the second half of the equation is companies that will see an uplift in their revenue because of AI-related investments. So CoreWeave and Microsoft fall in that bucket. But on the other side, you're going to see some struggle with, let's say, IBM Consulting, although IBM software should do well. And that is the bifurcation that we have. What is going to be most important for Microsoft, for example, is all the headline news that we are hearing about lower capacity or some constraints in data center work, whether that's going to have an impact on Azure guidance or their cloud revenue guidance for next quarter. That is going to be the biggest question going into the quarter for Microsoft.
Which of the names have the potential to surprise most to the upside, given what you've seen so far in terms of estimates?
I think CoreWeave has one potential, but at the same time, this stock moves so much on a daily basis with any new announcement that comes out. So it's tough to say whether a lot of that optimism is probably baked into the numbers at this point.
So what's the big thing that you guys are working on? I've referred so many people to the Bloomberg Intelligence Technology Team's AI report here, which really is definitive, I think, in kind of laying out for people what AI is and what are all the facets of it here. What's the next level of analysis for you guys in Bloomberg Intelligence Technology?
So the biggest thing we are trying to hone in and bifurcate this investment cycle that you mentioned, during the initial remarks. There are two aspects of it. One is everything that OpenAI is needing. It's signing contracts with NVIDIA, Oracle, AMD, and so forth. Now, at this time, OpenAI doesn't have the money to fund a lot of that stuff. They have enough financial backers to take care of it. So, so that's one area to focus on. The second part is companies like Meta, Amazon, Microsoft. They are going out and building capacity or signing up deals for data centers and new chips. Now, they have the cash to do it. So we are trying to figure out in these cases to see both of these scenarios, to see which ones of them will have a greater impact on the downstream ecosystem, whether it's hardware providers or chip providers, or for that matter, data center providers as well.
All right, Anurag, thank you so much. Anurag Rana is Bloomberg Intelligence tech analyst on what's been going on with Apple, AI, and a bit of a preview into the earnings season that's coming up. Speaking of which, Paul, I was looking, Netflix will be reporting in 6 days' time. I know it's not a traditional tech name, but it does kind of kick off tech earnings season.
It does. It trades like a tech name a lot of times in terms of valuation and volatility, but it's been just a great story. The streaming business.
Well, I think that because there were so many subscribers unsubscribing to Netflix because of the wokeism and some of their movies and series, that they may come in short in terms of their revenue. So it will be interesting to see if the cancellations of the subscriber base hurts their revenue. Before we go to the next video, that's going to be about Trump threatens to make Hamas disarm quickly and violently. This is on Times Radio. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen. You can also read the label on my website. This will target multiple systems. This will target and help with your heart health, vascular system, musculature, brain function, boost up your energy levels, and increase your metabolism. When you are doing this on a regular basis, you're also going to be able to help control your A1C levels. It's a very powerful compound that you should be taking every day. Take it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. I mix it with soft foods, but you should be taking this every day. This is a great way to get healthy. It's part of my anti-aging protocol, and that protocol is very simple. A multivitamin, the probiotic, Max 35 or Cleanse, C60, turmeric, ashwagandha, lignans, and then the Boomer Boost. They all are synergistic to slow down the aging process, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, help with your endocrine system, increase your metabolism, and help with your gut health. So please go to my store, get the Boomer Boost. It's a great product. And if you're an athlete, you should be taking Boomer Boost for your pre or post-workout fuel source. And you'll notice that you're getting strength gains from your sport, for your sport through Boomer Boost. Gladiator barley, you can take this separately or you can mix it with the Boomer Boost. I mix it. Now, Gladiator barley is a high-density protein. Now, this barley is an heirloom barley, very nutrient-dense. It has the micronutrients that you no longer have in normal barley. Now, this will help to build muscle if you're doing resistance training, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. Take this every day, and what you're going to notice is that your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better. By bringing down inflammation, you're helping with your cardiovascular health and reducing plaque formation. And bringing down inflammation systemically also helps your brain function. Because if you're bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level, your neurons are healthier. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Gladiator barley, do the resistance training, gain the muscle, bring down the inflammation, detoxify your body. It's a great way to get healthy. You can stack it together and you get an additional benefit by controlling your A1C levels. So Boomer Boost and Gladiator barley, very powerful stack. Very powerful stack. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to play Times Radio talking about Trump's threat to Hamas.
Since the day he became president, that he's going to personally get involved in Gaza in the sense of sending troops, but even after he'll say we won't send troops. So he's really just threatening that the war will turn. I think that in principle could happen if the deal broke down. I don't think we expect any American action against Hamas.
Now, on the front page of the Times this morning, Donald Trump says he'll make Hamas disarm after video emerged of the militant group killing suspected collaborators, their words, in Gaza. Donald Trump told reporters he will make sure the group gives up its weapons.
We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. You understand me? Because everyone says, oh, well, they won't disarm. They will disarm. And I spoke to Hamas. And I said, you're going to disarm, right?
Donald Trump also spoke about Hamas publicly killing its enemies.
You know, they did take out a couple of gangs that were very bad. very, very bad gangs, and they did take them out, and they killed a number of gang members. And that didn't bother me much, to be honest with you. That's okay. It's a couple of very bad gangs. You know, it's no different than other countries.
Meanwhile, Israel says it will.
All right, team, listen up. There's a national blood shortage. Big Ten schools, how do we get students, fans, alumni to donate? Hit me.
Meanwhile, Israel says it will now only allow half of the agreed number of aid trucks into Gaza. Our political analyst Ari Kovler joins us now from Jerusalem. Good morning.
Good morning.
We heard there from President Donald Trump. Lots of people have been quite concerned about the ability to disarm Hamas. Where do things stand now this morning in terms of getting Hamas to put down its weapons and essentially fulfill the terms of this agreement?
Well, look, there's kind of two or three different pieces here. One is, does Hamas get to remain the government of Gaza? Now, Hamas is saying it has no intention of doing that. It's willing to step down and hand over to someone, as long as it's the right someone. And so a lot of the debate in the next coming weeks to months on this phase two will be who that someone is and how that all works. The question of arms is also twofold. One is, Israel doesn't want Hamas to be a threat to it, but it also says if Hamas remains the biggest military force, the biggest armed force in Gaza, it doesn't really matter who says they're the government. The guys with the guns will still be in charge. So the question of is how do you disarm Hamas in a way that also gets them out of government? Now, Hamas has kind of indicated it's willing to do a certain amount of disarmament, basically give up heavier weapons, but they're not going to put down their guns. And I think, how you nuance that, would Trump consider it disarmament if they gave up big rockets but kept their guns? I guess we'll see in the coming months.
How seriously should people take that warning there from Donald Trump, who was essentially threatening violence against Hamas if they don't do what he's asking them to do?
I don't think I was taking it very seriously, honestly. Trump has continually threatened since the day he became president that he's going to personally get involved in Gaza in the sense of sending troops, but even he'll say he won't send troops. So he's really just threatening that the war will return. I think that in principle could happen if the deal broke down. I don't think we expect any American action against Hamas.
And in terms of how Israel is looking at this, we've heard that Israel is restricting aid. We referenced what happened in terms of the IDF and the shooting yesterday. Is there a sense that from the Israeli side that there is almost a sort of hesitation in fulfilling the commitments here too? Could this go backwards quickly?
Anything possible. I would say things seem to be back on track overnight. Israel was talking about holding up some of the new aid and reopening of the Rafah crossing because Hamas only gave 4 bodies of hostages when it was supposed to give a rather larger number. Since that time, last night at 10 p.m., Hamas gave another 4 bodies, some of which have already been identified. And supposedly today there's going to be another 4 or 5 transferred. That's enough for Israel to say, to be briefing this morning, that these threats of reducing the aid and closing the border, this is not going to happen, and we're back on track on that. And that's the latest that I'm hearing. When it comes to the shootings, I think one thing that we're going to see throughout the ceasefire is that there are still a lot of Israeli troops in Gaza beyond the agreed yellow line. And there are going to be times when they feel threatened and they see groups of men moving towards them and think they might be armed. I think this is a ceasefire in which there's going to be no shooting. It's going to be a ceasefire that looks a bit more like Lebanon, where there's almost actually an Israeli attack in Lebanon now every day against the Hezbollah position. But it doesn't escalate further because Hezbollah is essentially deterred from doing so. So I think that is what the ceasefire is likely to look like in the coming weeks and months. Unfortunately, it's not a ceasefire in which there's going to be no shooting, but there's not going to be kind of ground operations or intense military operations, rather kind of small actions that Israel frames as defensive.
And in terms of the political agreements, the new body, if you like, there's been a talk of Tony Blair being on that body. Where are we now in terms of the agreement of the membership and what that body will do?
Really nowhere at all. It's all up in the air. Actually, the Palestinian Authority quite likes Tony Blair, it seems, but Hamas don't want him. and the question of whether they get the veto, how countries have different views on this. We don't know which countries are going to be involved. Obviously, the Americans are, and some of the Arab nations. We don't know which Palestinians will be. Everything is up in the air. That's a long way away. I think we're going to have a longish period of months in which Hamas remains the government of Gaza, which Israel remains inside the Gaza border. Aid comes in, and then we pressure on, how we get to a period of a new government for Gaza and reconstruction.
Finally, we have all been watching the scenes of the hostages, the living hostages being reunited with family members. We are now starting to hear about some of the living conditions that they faced during their time with Hamas. What for you kind of stands out so far when you listen to some of those stories of people who have been returned?
Well, it's very interesting. Almost all of the hostages talk about how they were heartened by hearing the protests inside Israel, the rallies for them, and internationally. And as someone who attended some of those rallies, there was something to that, feeling like you were actually reaching them on the ground in Gaza. It wasn't just a kind of domestic political thing or just to make myself feel better. It had a real impact. It's clear that some of them were kept in really appalling conditions, essentially in solitary confinement for 2 years. A lot of them, it seems, were fed up in the last, not fed up, but fed in the last week or two to try and make them more presentable after having previously been skeletal. But that carries health risks, which is one of the reasons they're in hospital now. And just kind of seeing how many of them never gave up hope throughout this period.
Yeah, it's such an important point to remember, and I know that we will start to hear more of those stories over the coming days and weeks. Ari, thank you as ever for joining us to give us the latest. That's Ari Cottrell.
All right, we're going to go to CNN. Supposedly there was a body that was returned to Israel that is not a hostage. So maybe there was a mistake or it was done on purpose. I'm not sure. So we're going to go to CNN. But before we do that, please go to my store. Get the nattokinase. This is fibrinolytic. This will break up clots, but also help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Nattokinase you should take every day to help with your cardiovascular health. Super important. All right? So please go to my store. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Israel over the delayed return of the remains of hostages still being held by Hamas, an issue which could threaten the fragile ceasefire just days after it began. Now, as of this morning, only 8 of the 28 deceased hostages who were in Gaza have been returned to Israel. And the Israeli military says one of those 8 bodies is not an Israeli hostage. Under the terms of the ceasefire, Hamas had agreed to turn over the remains of all 28 by midnight on Monday. Now, in retaliation, Israel is restricting aid to Gaza. Families of those hostages are also demanding more action from the Israeli government, who they accuse of moving on now that the deal for the living hostages is done.
It was like the game is over. Now let's celebrate, the party's done, let's move on to the next thing. And we were saying, no, that's not the case. My son is no less of a hostage. And as it came out yesterday, yes, we're very happy for those families that are being able to hug their loved ones. But my son is entitled just as much to come out and for my family to have the closure that it expects to receive.
CNN Salma Abdelaziz. CNN Salma Abdelaziz joins me now. And Salma, there's always been a question about whether or not Hamas would be able to track down the remains of all of these hostages. Can you talk about what the concerns are now?
And Adi, that's absolutely the key kernel here. Let me start by explaining what we know so far, because this only just happened a couple of hours ago that the Israeli military announced that one of those 4 bodies that had been handed over overnight by Hamas to Israel was not that of a deceased hostage. Now, one source saying that they believe it was actually a misidentification by Hamas, not an intentional mistake. A second source saying that they do believe that that body is that of a Palestinian individual. Now, we did have a similar case to this in February of 2025, February of this year. Shira Bibas, a mother of two who had been kidnapped on October 7th, the body initially handed over as hers turned out to be the body of a Palestinian woman. A day later, her body was handed over by Hamas. So there is precedent here and hope that this can be resolved. But still, this means that so far, only 7 out of those 28 deceased hostages have been returned home. And as you mentioned, it was in the agreement that Hamas would hand over all those bodies by 72 hours, by that Monday deadline. But for months now, Prime Minister Netanyahu's own intelligence assessments have indicated that Hamas may not be able to retrieve and identify all of those 28 deceased hostages on the ground. Some may simply be held by other factions. Some may have been lost to this war. Some have been, one of the 28 is actually a lieutenant who was killed over a decade ago. So you can begin to understand the complexities. Still, there is a lot of frustration and anger on the ground, of course, particularly among Israeli families that have been seeking that closure. And their anger is not just directed at Hamas, it is also directed at Israeli politicians, some who took off their pins, indicating that the hostages are all home, something which is simply not the case. And in Gaza, the consequences are already raining down. Today, the United Nations saying that Israel, in response, has cut aid in half today. Only 300 aid trucks will be allowed into the enclave. It was 600 previously.
I have been saying that this was going to be a false peace and that this was going to rear its head when the shofar is not blown next year on September 11th. Why? Because that's Rosh Hashanah on the Sabbath. And there's a prohibition to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah if it coincides with the Sabbath. And every single time that happens throughout Jewish history, there's a curse in the community, the Jewish or the Jewish people, and or the whole world. And I have a big feeling here that this false peace is going to rear itself up in the year that starts on September 11th, 2026, all the way to October of 2027. Why? Because that's the Jewish calendar. Everything's based on the Jewish calendar, not the regular calendar. All right? And why is that also important? Because in September and October, those are the apexes of the strength of Esau's soul root. And Esau is the one that has to die. And there's this battle that's taking place that we call the international affairs between Jacob and Esau. Now, it's a foregone conclusion that Esau's going to die. How long it takes, no one really knows. But it's a foregone conclusion that Esau's going to die, not Jacob. All right? Now, doesn't this look like there's a false peace? It was kind of rushed. Now, what's the probability that I'm right and that there's not going to be a ceasefire and a peace, a lasting peace, versus some sort of long-lasting peace? The probability is extremely high that what I am saying is true. 80 or 90% chance of that happening. Just look at it. You can see that it's starting to collapse.
Barely enough, according to humanitarian workers, and Israel's security bodies are now potentially recommending that Israel redeploy its forces to parts of Gaza or shut down the Rafah crossing completely. So serious concerns now that we're seeing the cracks in this ceasefire deal. And at the heart of it all, Adi, of course, is Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has had this knowledge for months now that Hamas may not be able to retrieve all the dead.
Now demonize Netanyahu. Netanyahu isn't a great guy, so you don't need to try to demonize him. He gives you enough ammunition for that. But the thing is that of course CNN trying to demonize Netanyahu. Why? Because CNN is promoting an ultra-liberal agenda, and there's an awful lot of secular Jews out there that hate Netanyahu. That's the reason why she just said that. But the thing is that people need to understand. Let's say in the United States, do you think it is your right? It's your right that you deserve the country? You have a right to the land of the United States? I'm not talking about right relative to a legal term. I'm talking about just like a metaphysical right. You really have that right to the land? You only have right when you can defend and win. So you have a right for existence as a human being. You don't have a right to a country, right? The same thing with the Palestinians. Does the Palestinians have a right to a country? No. If they can't win on the battlefield, no. If the United States can't defend its land, should we go to the victor and say, it's our right to have the land back? No. Because in this case, might makes right. Does Israel deserve the land of Israel? Of the land of that section of the Middle East? Of that territory? No. But if they defend it, they deserve it. See, this is the thing that people don't get. If you win a war, you get the spoils. All right? It's that simple. Mankind has always been like that. Going all the way back to Cain and Abel. So why do we assume that people have a right to a land? You have to defend it. You have to win on the battlefield, and then it's your ownership. And when you can control your borders, and you can control your society, then you have the land. But if you can't win on the battlefield, you don't have this. It's not your right to it. You have to earn it. And obviously, the Gazans lost. They didn't win. They lost. But we have this international community that says, no, we got to carve it out for the Palestinians. But Israel won. Should we carve out parts of Texas and give it back to the Mexicans? Why don't we give the upper peninsula of Michigan to the Canadians? If you win on the battlefield, it's real simple. You won. You shouldn't have the international community telling you how to divide the spoils. So no, the Palestinians don't have a right to the land, and the same thing with with Israel. Israel doesn't have a right to the land; they have to defend it. They have to win. That's what makes it right. This Westphalian United Nations horseshit will always keep that region in an unstable state. Because how did we reach stability with our borders in the United States? We won on the battlefield, and we defended what was conquered.
We'll be following this today. Thank you for your reporting. Joining me right now is one of those parents still waiting, Ruby Hen, the father of Isai Hen, the youngest American hostage taken. Ruby, it's good to see you again. This all must be such a mix of relief for the other families, but also deep disappointment for your family. What are you hearing this morning?
Yes, I appreciate.
For your customers, a contact is not enough to feel connected. At Avaya, our mission is to help you turn single engagements into meaningful journeys, instantly and ongoing, gaining trust, loyalty, and momentum along the way. It's time to redefine your contact center as your connection center, strengthening customer relationships that build business value. Finally, there's a platform that makes every connection possible. Connecting your channels and your data. Connecting your applications using AI. Anyone and everyone with just a click or two. Orchestrate customer experiences through Avaya Infinity to be in rhythm with your customers, to create harmony among your employees, to guide the journey they all want to take instantly and automatically. Using what you know about those you serve to deliver the experiences they all deserve. Avaya Infinity is the platform for strengthening customer relationships, turning contacts into connections, and making possibilities infinite.
We met in high school, and our daughter is 10 weeks old, very fresh. We had this big plan to purchase a new home. We had our money set aside in a savings account. It wasn't doing anything for us. I don't even remember what our interest was. To you?
It's like 0.1%.
That's when we found Wealthfront. With our cash account, with all the interest that we earned, it made us feel like we got a huge piece of this kitchen for free. The high APY with Wealthfront was a clear winner.
Yes, if we just go to the fact, it's been 96 hours, when it was supposed to come out 48 hostages, and 96 hours have passed by, and we only have 28 of 27 of those hostages out. I don't think that was the intention of the agreement that was put in place, and definitely not for the United States, that out of those 48, there were 2 U.S. citizens that back from Afghanistan.
The fact that one of the bodies returned has now been identified overnight by the IDF to not match any of the remaining hostages. What do you think that means? Why do you think Hamas would do that, or what do you think it says about what Hamas knows of the whereabouts of the hostages?
They don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think there's lots of psychological warfare and a lot of testing the boundaries. Hamas could have done it unintentionally because it might be difficult to find, but they also might have done it intentionally to just convey the message how difficult it is. That means that they need much more time. And that's the way to play with the agreements that were put in place regarding the future of Gaza and all the discussions that are going on in phase 2. It was very specific, where the agreement said 72 hours Hamas needs to provide all of the hostages that it has in its possession, and intelligence on those that it does not. That did not happen. So we are in a breach. We share our concerns to the U.S. as well as the Israeli government that the sanctions or the lack of a deadline of providing the hostages was not in place. And, it was based on good faith and the desire of the parties to move forward.
People don't get it. They don't understand. All they gotta do is just read their Bible. The mother of Jacob and Esau, she knew that Esau was an animal. And that's why she convinced Jacob to make sure that he got the blessing over his brother. Because Esau was born first. They were twins. All right? Now, Esau is red and hairy. He gets mad easily. He kills. He's not a scholar. He's not a homebody. He's not, he's a man of the field, right? And he gets enraged and jealous. But he's smart. He's smart. He's cunning. He's a predator. And now individuals, groups of people, even countries get their energy from a soul root. And the soul root of Hamas and the Palestinians is Esau. Now people would say, no, it's Ishmael. No, that's Saudi Arabia. No, Esau. The ones repent, they'll become positive Esau and the intellectual Esau. But the ones that don't repent, aka Hamas, aka Hezbollah, even the theocratic regime of Iran, guess what? That's negative Esau. And the Bible stated that Benjamin chops off the head of Esau. And the head ends up being buried with the patriarchs, the intellect, because Esau repented. The body, the animalistic, isn't allowed to be buried with the patriarchs. And this is very reminiscent of what we're seeing here with the destruction of Gaza. Now, people need to really pay attention here. Negative Esau has to be completely destroyed. It cannot be allowed to live. This is the reason why there's a false peace. This is why it's not going to work. There'll be more destruction. More land will be taken away from the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank now. And the Israelis are going to have enough of this bullshit, and they're going to pull down the Dome of the Rock. Now, is that tomorrow? No. But as weapons become more deadly, using more drones and more AI, it's going to be more costly, more collateral damage, because the job wasn't done in the 1970s or the 1980s or in 2000s or in 2010s or even the 2020s. It wasn't even done during the Crusades. You know, if the Crusades worked, we wouldn't have this fucking problem, would we? The Christians lost. This goes back to what I said. You don't have a right to the land. No one has rights to land. You got to fight for it. And during the Crusades, guess what? The Muslims won. And now, fast forward to the modern day era, and we're still dealing with the problem of the Dome of the Rock. We wouldn't have that problem if the Christians actually took down the Dome of the Rock. No, they were afraid.
A different situation. We are very concerned that this window of opportunity of getting hostages out might close. And again, there are 2 U.S. citizens that are not accounted for. And I think the U.S., specifically the president, Mr. Witkoff, need to figure out how do we make sure that we continue getting those hostages out, including the 2 U.S. citizens.
Really quickly, President Trump is saying, he said before the Israeli parliament, the war is over. He's talking about this moving into phase 2. On Monday, the Speaker of the Israeli Parliament took off his yellow ribbon pin, kind of following the return of the last living hostage as kind of a symbol of this is over. Do you think that they are now looking past your son?
Well, I hope.
Break free from the challenges of management complexity and storage silos and embrace a revolutionary storage experience that propels you.
Well, I hope not. It's a narrative that, of course, we are concerned about. But my son is no less of a hostage than the other 27 that came out over the last couple of days. And he is a U.S. citizen, and I hope being a U.S. citizen, that matters. I hope other U.S. citizens listening to me now and might be traveling.
Well, the thing here is that, if I was president, if Dr. Paul Cottrell was president of the United States, and this happened in 2023, and we had American hostages, even if they were Israeli, if we had American hostages, I would say you have 10 days, 10 fucking days to give them back, or we're going to destroy everything in our path. Totally obliviate obliterate the Gazans. 10 days. Yeah, 10 days. And then the next day I get on CNN, 9 days, 8 days, 7 days, you know, and you do a countdown and you destroy. Because the only way to fight fire is with fire. But what we had was a weakling as a president, AKA Biden. And who knows if he was even cognitively functioning when this happened. Probably wasn't. So who was in charge? No one really knows. No one really knows. But we had American citizens that were killed and held in captivity for 2 years because of lack of leadership. And the only thing that the Arabs understand is force, is strength. Why? Because that's how you deal with someone that is red and hairy. All right? Force. Why did we not do what I just said? Because we were afraid.
One, and God forbid, someone might take them. It should be a liability, not an asset, to take U.S. citizens out. And it's also inconceivable that Russia got all of its citizens out, Germany, France got their citizens out, but the U.S. still have 2 citizens left behind. What does that mean about being a U.S. citizen?
What are you being told by the State Department, the White House, or even the Israeli government at this point of what to expect and what to prepare for? And what are you hearing and what's your sense? Because you have been advocating for your son from the very beginning. You and I have had so many conversations. Do you get the sense that they are as committed as they were before to returning your son to you?
I do. Like, I have no doubt that that is the intention. I just think that the fundamentals of the agreement that were put in place.
You know, this is very reminiscent of, there was supposed to be an exchange of the POWs and the Missing in Action soldiers during Vietnam. And then all of a sudden, you know, the signing of the war, you know, the war is over. And guess what? There were a lot of missing soldiers. And they were forgotten. They were forgotten. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen with this case, but there is precedence. Look at the Vietnam era. Look at what happened. There were a lot of soldiers that didn't come home.
And that exactly is where Hamas is playing at the moment, and they're testing the boundaries. And I think that's where the United States and the mediators need to do whatever is possible to make sure that Hamas goes back to what was agreed upon and releases as soon as possible all of the hostages that they have. They are in breach at the moment. And it was also assumed that 2 U.S. citizens can be accounted for, based upon the knowledge that I have. So they should have been out, and they are not out. And the question is, what do we do?
Here's the problem. This is the problem with is the problem with the secular movement in Israel. They just wanted the hostages back. They don't even want the Temple Mount to be rebuilt, which is antithetical to what is actually written. All right, so they're part of the problem. They're part of the problem. You wonder why that there were no Orthodox people that were captured during October 7th of 2023? Because they were following a holiday. The ones that were, you know, at the rave, they weren't following the holiday. Don't you think that there was a little bit of retribution there? Cosmic retribution, if you want to call it that. Metaphysical retribution. Not getting to the heart of the problem. You're dealing with someone that's red and hairy, Esau, and you're also dealing with infighting within the Jewish faith, within the Israeli constituency. And all they cared about was the hostages. Well, that's not the. They're missing the forest through the from the trees. All right. All right. I want to go to Bloomberg. They're talking. It looks like they're talking about Bassett and the tariff. But before I do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin D3. This is really important, especially for the fall and the winter. Vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor. So it's going to help with proper cellular processes. D3 also helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. Super important for the fall and the winter. D3 also helps to absorb calcium. And D3 can help with the cardiovascular health and your bone density, especially for bone density if you do resistance training. So please go to my store and get the vitamin D3.
All things considered, it's a good place to be in a highly polarized America. But when you look at specifically the issues or the policies, that support falls off considerably. When you look across the signature initiatives by the administration, he doesn't garner a majority support in any of them. Not even immigration. When you go specifically at immigration, we talk about deportation, it falls to around 40%. Obviously, he still garners the support of Republicans, supermajority percent of Republicans, but across the board, these signature policies do not find majority support.
Fascinating numbers on crime here, Cliff, and it reminds me of polls that find, congressional approval ratings are off a cliff. They're in the single digits, unless you're talking about someone's own member of Congress, and they love that guy. Just you fire everyone but my guy or my gal, and that's apparently the case for crime in your city. Your city is safe, just not the other ones. And when you take a look at this, you asked questions about this compared to this time last year. Is crime in the following area higher, lower, or the same? When you look at the country, through the roof, it's higher. Major cities, a little bit lower. Your state as a whole, we're down in the 30s here. Your city or community, nobody thinks that crime is a major problem. It's in the 20s. So the president has seized on a national perception here that people may not rationalize with their own town.
Yeah, I love my town. I love my guy. I don't like your town. I don't like your guy. That's something we see perennially in polling since even the 1930s. And indeed, the administration has leveraged that, right? It's all about proximity. The closer I am to the issue of crime, the less I think it's a problem. And he has, pushed that agenda. Now, the Republicans have historically pushed that agenda with their base being in the suburbia and rural areas, not in those sort of blue urban areas. But ultimately, that's the explanation of the difference in perceptions. Now, that said, there is very little support for the deployment of National Guard troops in the urban areas. It doesn't matter how you ask it. You only get somewhere between 20 and 30% of Americans agreeing with it. But still, you get a strong majority of Republicans. But as a general, not base issue, it doesn't flow.
And Cliff, I do want to go back to one point that you made at the top, just about political extremism. We saw the White House present Charlie Kirk with a posthumous Medal of Honor yesterday. Some of your research shows that this had been front and center for Americans even before Kirk's murder about 5 weeks ago. What are you seeing there in the numbers?
Yeah, so as you said, Mario, it's a great point. It actually, worry about political extremism predates the Charlie Kirk assassination. It already was the #1 issue. What's happened since then, it's become a more national issue, not a Democratic issue, because historically it's been very much a Democratic issue, worries about threats to democracy, worries that Trump was authoritarian. Now we have Republicans saying the same, that they are worried with political violence, and it's directly a function of the Kirk issue.
It's great to have you back, Cliff, and thanks for sharing this research from Ipsos.
It's very interesting. when you pay attention to Plato's Republic and how it maps to our days today, there's infighting with democracy, and then it leads to tyranny. There's a tyrant that comes. Now, I don't think it's Trump, and our democracy is, our constitutional republic will go on for many more years, you know, with the balance of powers between the judicial, legislative, and the executive. But there's going to be a boiling of stress and tension in the society between the haves and the have-nots. Because what's happening is that the representative government is being beholden to an aristocracy, a wealthy class, all right? Because the cost to run a campaign, they're going to be beholden to K Street. They're going to be beholden to the lobbying groups, even the super PACs. Now, I happen to meet one of the key lawyers that's pushing to try to prevent super PACs from being formed. And it's going through some legal hoops and court systems, but there is a high probability within the next 5 years that the Supreme Court will see this case and have to make a definitive judgment if super PACs are legal or not. So it's a convoluted legal argument, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to be one. But the thing is that there's a problem with the haves and the have-nots. There's a stress that's building up. And in the future, there's a high probability of a tyrant to take charge because of this stress. All right? And this is what Plato's Republic's warning about. This is what Socrates is saying in Plato's Republic about these levels of a society where you have the aristocracy, you have timocracy, you have the oligarchs, you have democracy, and then you have tyranny. Now, again, you know, it goes back to the idea: are you going to fight for constitutional freedoms or not? They're endowed by our Creator, but if you don't protect them, you lose them. All right. With that, let's take a look at what else is being played in the news. All right. I want to take a look at. Let's listen in. Just let's see where the Supreme Court's at. It hears arguments in key voting rights. Hopefully they're playing this. I'm not sure. This is live. Nah. All right, all right. It doesn't look like the Supreme Court's talking. I thought they were talking. I thought they were talking here. All right, let's listen to Times Radio. Trump can put Putin out of business and end the war.
There are no red lines. Putin can huff and he can puff and he can make all the noise he wants to make. But at the end of the day, it's just huffing and puffing. And so I think that we should be giving Ukrainians everything they ask for and everything they need to cause Putin untold damage, particularly to his military infrastructure and to his economy, because that's going to be the only moment that he comes to the table and agrees a ceasefire. He's not going to agree a ceasefire if he's not under duress, and he's not currently under duress.
Hi, I'm Fergus McPhee, and welcome to the Trump Report on Times Radio. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today on the show is Sir Bill Browder. Bill, we always appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the Trump Report.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start then today, Bill, with fresh from celebrating the brokering of his 20-point Gaza peace plan between Israel and Hamas, Donald Trump suggested that he might be willing to now send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine in what he described would be a new step of aggression in the war. What is your reaction to that possible news?
Well, on the surface, it looks like a great announcement. Ukraine needs all the help they can get. They need to strike targets, military targets, and economic targets inside of Russia. The Tomahawk missile is a very effective tool for doing that. The one reservation I have, which is also intimated in some of these announcements, is that Trump would, or the United States would ask for restrictions on targets that could be hit. And one of the things which I found so frustrating about the U.S. military aid to Ukraine during the Biden administration is that they would provide quite a bit of aid, but then they would put these very onerous restrictions on the Ukrainians to say that they could only use ATACMS missiles inside the territory of Ukraine, which I think is kind of crazy. If you have a foreign invader invading your territory and you can only hit them when they're in your territory, that kind of defeats the purpose. And in a certain way, Trump's initial foray into Ukraine, which was to withdraw military aid, gave the Ukrainians absolute freedom of movement to do what they wanted to do. And we've all seen that without the U.S. restricting Ukraine on hitting targets inside of Russia, they can be quite effective. And of course, we're all watching on a daily basis as Ukraine, using just drone technology for the most part, has immobilized and destroyed somewhere between 20 and 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity. And there are now fuel shortages and all sorts of other economic problems as a result inside of Russia. So what I'm worried about is Trump providing Tomahawks and then saying, you've got to give us a list of every target you want to hit in Russia, and we may reject those targets. And so let's see what happens, but that's the issue going forward.
Because we know the Tomahawks, I think they can range from between sort of 1,500 to 1,800 miles, which would hypothetically mean Ukraine could strike Moscow. But are you saying you'd imagine Moscow might be on that list of do not strike targets?
Well, I don't know what's going to be on the list or what's not going to be on the list, but I know that having a list creates a problem, because there's this fantasy that if you hit Russia, you're going to escalate, and all of a sudden we're going to be in a terrible nuclear war, which has never proved to be true. We know from the very beginning of the war that so many things could have been done. First, it was tanks, then it was ATACMS missiles, then it was F-16s, and everybody said, no, we can't do that. That's going to escalate. That's going to cause problems. No, we can't. And then we ended up doing it. It didn't escalate. It didn't cause problems. And if we had done it earlier, we would have saved lives and perhaps changed the outcome of the war. And so I don't know what's going to be discussed in these meetings. I don't know what restrictions will be put in place. That's the main reservation I have. The headline looks good. The details may not be so good.
Mm. So is there any cause for concern then? Because we know that Joe Biden's administration kind of famously didn't ever send any Tomahawks to Ukraine. So if this is a Ukraine, so if this is a red line for Moscow, what does that realistically mean for the war and the world?
There's no such thing as a red line for Moscow. Moscow doesn't have the capacity to create red lines. Their big trump card is nuclear retaliation. But the reason why...
Breaking news, Bassett says action will total $40 billion to help Argentina. Last week it was late last week it was 20 billion, so it's even worse now. Argentina bonds jump on reports of larger U.S. aid.
Putin hasn't used nuclear weapons is the same reason why every other Russian and Soviet leader has never used nuclear weapons, because using nuclear weapons leads to mutually assured destruction. And so there's sort of an absolute practical prohibition on using nuclear weapons. And otherwise, there are no red lines. Putin can huff and he can puff and he can make all the noise he wants to make. But at the end of the day, it's just huffing and puffing. And so I think that we should be giving the Ukrainians everything they ask for and everything they need to cause Putin untold damage, particularly to his military infrastructure and to his economy, because that's going to be the only moment that he comes to the table and agrees a ceasefire. He's not going to agree a ceasefire if he's not under duress, and he's not currently under duress.
Because you mentioned the Ukrainian-made drones here, but if the US does send these Tomahawks, that is a game changer, isn't it? That's a level up from Ukrainian drones.
I'm not sure anything is a game changer per se. Everything adds more pressure onto Russia. If they have the Tomahawks, they can use those Tomahawks to destroy arms production. If they can use it to destroy military bases, planes, or oil exploration, production, refining capacity. Those are the types of things which then adds more and more pressure on the Putin. And I think that altogether, putting that in place, other things, other military offensive military equipment, plus going after Russia's oil revenue, those are all things that put together can put Putin in a position where he has no choice but to negotiate. But right now he's not in that position. And if you take President Trump at his word, he wants to force a negotiation, and that would be the thing. Those would be the things to do to force a negotiation.
Yeah, both yourself and other contributors have mentioned sort of the oil refineries on this show before. Now, peace through strength has become sort of something of a doctrine for the Trump administration. I think he even used the words in his address to Israel earlier this week. Do you think we've seen that yet applied in his approach to Russia?
I think we've seen just the opposite. So Trump has come in. What has he done practically? He practically has withdrawn financial military aid for Ukraine. There have been no more military aid packages proposed by the Trump administration or approved by Congress since he's been president. There's still some remaining U.S. military aid that was approved by Biden and approved by Congress that's coming into Ukraine, but that's going to run out. He has not imposed crippling sanctions of any sort on Russia. In fact, I'm not aware of any particular sanctions he's imposed at all. And so those are the two things that would be considered strength. Neither of them have been done. Now, I would be the biggest supporter of any actions he takes which deals with both those two issues, and hopefully he will.
Trump is expected to meet with President Zelensky at the White House on Friday, as we just mentioned. We've seen the kind of relationship between those two, at least publicly, change since that infamous Oval Office meeting in February. What will you be looking out for and hoping to hear on Friday from that meeting?
Well, I mean, first of all, the fact that the meeting is happening, I think, is an encouraging sign. It wasn't scheduled a week ago.
Yeah, I think this will be the third time they've met since January, which is it's definitely an increase.
So having the meeting is good. Trump is on a high right now. He's actually, he's a big braggart. He brags about things that he has nothing to do with, but his success in Israel is absolutely his success, and I think that he actually discovered the joy of heroism. It was heroic what he did with his whole conflict in Israel, and I think that he probably all of the endorphins are shooting off in his body, and he's feeling the glory of doing something heroic. And I think that he's probably on a heroism high, and he probably wants to repeat the feeling with Ukraine. And so the fact that he hastily organized this meeting, I think, is a good sign. We don't know what's going to be discussed, and it's impossible to really predict because nothing is predictable in the Trump world. But the fact that the meeting is happening is good, and it's happening in a good context because he made these statements at the United Nations, completely changing his views, saying that Ukraine could win the war. That's a lot different than the view that he took at the Oval Office with Zelensky, where he berated him and said, "You have no cards." So we just have to see. But trying to predict what Trump is going to do is a foolish game because he never does. He's the most unpredictable president the United States has ever had, and perhaps that's his that may be his superpower in this situation. If we can't predict it, Putin probably can't predict it. Zelensky can't predict it, but maybe he'll do something which will be helpful to Ukraine, and we just have to hope that that's the case.
Yeah, you mentioned that hero narrative.
Pluto TV is your home for premium Black entertainment. You bring it on. Check out the Black Collective and stream 19 live channels of your favorite.
Yeah, you mentioned that hero narrative. Are you confident that he'll sort of keep that up? Because even if he does make this pivot and is serious about pushing for peace in Ukraine, we can only sort of judge the president on his actions. And in the last week, we've seen, like you said, his great work with brokering that peace deal. But one of the criticisms I think people have raised is that they kind of have this ingrained idea that he won't have the attention to see that through. Or, he's got this deal now, but he will lose interest in a year's time. Are you concerned that that might happen on Ukraine?
Well, Trump has the the attention span of a fruit fly, and so in all issues he moves from one thing to the other. But some of these things don't require intense attention at all times. Some of these things require a policy decision. Supply Tomahawks and allow the Ukrainians to use them for whatever purpose. Once that decision has been made, it's not like Donald Trump has to be micromanaging it. If Ukraine needs more resources, perhaps provide a military aid package, approve it, let Congress vote on it, and then it's done. This is not something that requires Trump to be sitting at his desk every night, watching everything that comes through. And so I don't think that it's necessary for him to be detail oriented. He just needs to make some big, bold, supportive decisions, and if he makes those decisions will have an impact.
But it does require, specifically with the oil refineries and crippling sanctions, it does require the will of the Western world, right? I mean, people have sort of been calling for these for the last 3 years, and we still haven't quite got them yet.
Well, on the oil refineries, and just to summarize why it's so important, 8 oil refineries, 2 in China, 4 in India, and 2 in Turkey, basically buy all the Russian oil that's sold out of Russia, and that's adds up to $300 or $400 billion of money for the Russian economy, which is what Putin lives on to fund his war. If we were to tell those refineries not to buy the oil, and you'll be punished and can't do business with the West if you buy that oil, and they don't buy that oil, Putin is out of business. And of course, that's a really powerful argument. It's not something that's Trump's decision alone. It's a decision of the European Union, of the UK, of Canada, Australia, Japan. But if all the allies were to work together on that particular decision, that would end the war, I believe.
But what is that reticence? Is it a financial one?
Well, the main reason why it hasn't been done so far is that there is a fear, not an insignificant fear, that if Russia is a major supplier of oil to the world, and you tell all the buyers of that oil you can't buy it, that effectively takes a lot of oil off the market, takes a lot of supply off the market, demand is the same, and the oil price goes up. Now, interestingly, if you look at OPEC oil production, in the last few weeks, it's increased a lot. And if you look at the oil price, it's starting to go down. And so I don't know if there's been conversations taking place behind the scenes. I would hope that there would be with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, who are now all partners with America on the Middle East peace, where Trump could be making these demands, and maybe they're actually following through on them. Nobody has indicated why they've increased oil production like they have, but this may be a prelude, hopefully it's a prelude to a strong policy decision to cut off Russia from the oil markets, which would then truly have the effect of putting Putin in an untenable position, and then he'd have to negotiate a ceasefire.
Yeah, you said an untenable position. Is that, in your mind, the only sort of proven way to help him negotiate?
Well, there's two things. One is giving Ukraine offensive weapons so that they can pummel Russia's economy and military capacity, and two is to take away the money that Russia has to conduct its war. If you do those two things in parallel and effectively, then Putin will be in a position where he's not pounding his chest and saying, I can carry on into perpetuity on this. And the time is limited for us because we're living in a world of democracies. Putin is he's not a democratically elected leader. He's a dictator. And so he doesn't have to worry about midterms and the next elections and so on. Whereas in all of our countries in the West, all of us supporters of Ukraine, we have all sorts of things to worry about. We have in France, I think we're on our fourth government, and Marine Le Pen, who's funded by the Russians, is waiting in the wings. In Germany, you have the AfD, again, a pro-Russian party with the most votes. You've got a Czech prime minister who's just come in, who's anti-NATO, may not be pro-Russia, but anti-support for Ukraine. You've got Dutch parliamentary elections where you have Geert Wilders, who's a far-right person. And so you've got a lot of stuff going on our side, which, one or two of these things could end up changing the course of how the West supports Ukraine. And so time is not on our side, and we need to give the Ukrainians enough so that time is not on Putin's side either.
But would you have said, though, when Trump took office for the first time, I don't think we could necessarily say that he was pro-Russia, but he was a little bit more reticent on Ukraine. And yet the longer that he's sort of been dealing with both countries, he's found it so difficult to deal with the Kremlin. We have seen that shift, position shift from him.
That's absolutely the case. And I can remember everyone was panicking about Giorgia Meloni, saying, well, she comes from a right-wing party and her coalition partners are this guy Salvini, who is pictured in Moscow allegedly taking money from Russian sources. But she's turned out to be one of the best prime ministers in Europe when it comes to supporting Ukraine and being tough on Russia. So it's very difficult to predict too much, but we've also seen how damaging it can be. Look at what Viktor Orban has been doing in the European Union. He's the prime minister of Hungary, and he's using Hungary's position in the European Union to veto all sorts of policies towards Ukraine. Hungary's population is 1% of the EU population, that he's effectively got a veto over all sorts of decisions in the EU. And so that's the fear that I have and many other people have about all these different right-wing candidates. Perhaps most of them will actually turn out to be okay, but all it takes is one or two of them, and life could be very difficult for all of us if they veto policies that help Ukraine finally win this war.
I just want to ask,
Ask has a vision to ensure that healthcare is a basic human right, irrespective of where someone might live.
I just want to ask if there's a danger to extrapolate too much from the work that Donald Trump has done on the Gaza peace plan in the last sort of week and a half. Because we know, in that situation is kind of unique in that we know that the US and Israel are very close allies, while also Hamas was in a situation where they had reason to stop the destruction that we were seeing in Gaza. With Russia and Ukraine at the moment, is there a will to end that war?
No, there's no will. So Putin needs the war in order to stay in power. If he's not in power, he ends up going to jail, losing his money, and probably dying. So for him, he needs the war to stay in power. And the only reason that he would ever stop the war is if it's just going so catastrophically that he thinks he's going to lose power by staying in the war. And Ukrainians have to fight this war because, as painful as the war is, it's a lot less painful than Russian occupation. And why is Russian occupation so bad? All we need to do is look at the images from Bitchute. This was an occupied city near Kiev that was then freed. And what we saw in Bitchute was that every woman in Bitchute was raped, and the men were herded together, hands tied behind their backs, tortured, and then shot in the back of the head. And then the children were all kidnapped and taken to Russia. And so for the Ukrainians, no matter how painful war is and how terrible it is, and the terrorism that goes on every day, it's infinitely better than Russian occupation. So there's no chance that the Ukrainians are going to surrender, and there's no chance that Putin is going to stop the war unless he thinks being in the war is riskier for him personally than not being at war. And he's not gotten there yet. And none of this is going to be because Trump and Putin are, quote, friends. This is going to be because there's so much pressure on Putin that he has no choice. He only responds to a boot on the throat, and that's what we have to do now.
So the Gaza peace plan was, an incredibly difficult piece of diplomacy. If we'll go back to the start of the conversation, if Trump is serious now about Ukraine, I mean, is this even more complicated?
Well, I think it's actually not that complicated. It's all about offensive weapons for Ukraine and punishing sanctions for Putin. It's just a question of, and by the way, and a lot of allies, with the whole Middle East story, it was probably much more complicated because there were so many different cross currents of argument. I think in the Russia-Ukraine thing, it's black and white. There's an aggressor and there's a victim. There was a brief period of time when Trump first came to power where he didn't recognize Ukraine's victimhood. He seems to now. Everybody else does. And so I think this is actually a simpler conflict to resolve in the sense that once we make our decision about how do we put pressure on Putin, we can just follow through on that. And then I think eventually he'll crack.
So Bill Browder, thank you very much for joining us on the Trump Report.
Thank you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this multivitamin. This multivitamin has the multivitamins for proper enzymatic activity. They are cofactors that will attach to the enzyme, change the conformation, and that enzyme will perform more efficiently. Your cells will perform more efficiently. And it's the foundation for my anti-aging protocol. It's easy to digest. Get this complete multivitamin and stack it with the probiotics. Now, I have two types of probiotics. You can get the powdered version or the veggie cap version. Both are very high quality, and by taking a good probiotic, you're going to have a better gut biome. You're going to have a better immune system at the gut level. You're going to have better communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You'll have better skin over time, and your brain function will improve. Because with a good gut biome, you're actually going to sleep better. And by sleeping better and having those REM cycles and deep sleep cycles, you're going to be able to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. In addition, you'll be able to absorb your nutrients better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality probiotics, either in the veggie cap form or in the powdered form. I prefer taking the powdered version because I mix it with my soft food for lunch, and I take a lot of different powders like the collagen and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost and the lignans. So it's just easier for me. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the probiotics. Take it with the complete multivitamin, which is very easy to digest. And by doing that, you are building that foundation to slow down the aging process. Good health starts at the gut. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I want to play a short clip here. It's only 5 minutes long by Bloomberg talking about U.S. tariff rates rise to highest since 1930s.
It's not broken yet, but it's under strain. It's under strain because of tariffs. It's under strain because of geopolitical tensions. It's under strain because of the trade war. And we can see this in the threats flying back between President Trump and China right now over everything from shipping to rare earths to cooking oil.
We have prosperity, Professor, and we see it, folks, in the Morgan Stanley earnings coming out here. It's all the beat, all the same thing of our financial system doing well. Morgan Stanley up over 3% here on the news. Maurice Amsfeld, there just seems to be two Americas, one affected by goods and trade and worry and angst, and another a financial boom like Morgan Stanley. Can we exist like this?
Well, the U.S. economy has become increasingly financialized over the decades. And, at some level, the U.S. is the world's banker at this point. And interestingly, finance hasn't seen the kind of backlash that we've seen against trade. Trade is blamed for deficits with other countries. It's blamed for the decline of manufacturing. We don't see people wanting to curb financial transactions. Quite the contrary, we're seeing deregulation, stable coins, and the like. So there really is a divorce between those two sectors. And the question I have is, can that go on forever?
Yeah.
Or will the trade tensions eventually feed into the financial sphere? I think they will.
And Professor, that's kind of where we are right now. The folks that are supporting tariffs, they say, we are not seeing the economy slow down. We recently had a very strong third quarter GDP print. We are not seeing a material increase in inflation data, although we are now lacking data because of the shutdown. So again, the supporters of tariffs are saying, we're just not seeing those economic headwinds coming from tariffs. So my question to you is it just a matter of time, or are corporations adapting?
Oh, I think it's a matter of time. There is some adaptation, of course, as corporations look for cheaper suppliers. But just sort of look at what we've seen. We have not seen any material fall in the dollar prices that foreign countries charge for us. We've seen some limited increase in consumer prices of imported goods and close substitutes for those imported goods, but not enough to offset the tariff. But we've also seen substantial revenue coming into the Treasury from tariffs, which is being paid by our importers. So how do you square that circle? You square it with a hit to profitability, and with the observation that firms have been swallowing these tariffs to some extent while they wait for tariff policy to stabilize and figure out what it's going to be going forward. Now that we kind of know where we are with tariffs to some extent, I think firms are going to be adjusting by passing those cost increases on.
Professor Amsfeld, synthesize here, say, the work of Douglas Irwin at Dartmouth with down the hall from you at Berkeley, Barry Eichengreen, and this whole trade upset and the risk to the dollar. This goes back to Amsfeld, Rogoff, and frankly back to Mundell. I'm assuming you don't have a fear of the gloom crew on the dollar. Is that correct?
Gloom crew. I'm worried long term about the status of the dollar. I think there are very strong forces keeping the dollar in the prime position it's in global markets as the world's currency. But foreign countries are increasingly worried about the kind of coercive punitive actions that this administration has been taken to enforce its will globally, not just in the trade sphere, but looking at issues like internal politics. We see this across the board for positive and negative. The Treasury right now is bailing out Argentina for largely political reasons. So I think the bottom line is that foreign countries no longer trust the U.S. as a responsible steward of the global economy. They're going to seek to decouple and insure themselves against policy volatility emanating from right here.
Okay. I'm gonna play a CNN clip about Putin. Yeah, they're talking to a former NATO official. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This collagen is very high quality. This is dual purpose. You take it every day. This is a month's supply. This will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your joint health, cartilage, Also, bone density. Do some resistance training, take the collagen. This is very high quality. Please go to my store and get this. And you can also stack it with or take it separately, the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley is a very high nutrient, micronutrient barley that you can't get at a regular store, right? This is special stuff. This is a month's supply. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. I mix it with hummus, but you can mix it with yogurt or maybe applesauce. But take it every day. And what this will do is bring down inflammation, detoxify your body, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. That means you're slowing down the aging process, all right? By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying and soaking up free radicals daily, what that's going to do is improve your immune system, your endocrine system, your brain function. By bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level, you're maintaining your neural health. You're maintaining the health of the neuron and the myelin sheath. And when you do that, your neural network will be protected. Also, by bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. So you're helping with cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, get the heirloom barley, bring down the inflammation, soak up those free radicals, and detoxify your body. And a great stack would be to take the heirloom barley with the collagen. So you're helping with your skin, you're helping with your musculature, you're helping with your joint health, you're helping with the bone structure, you're helping with your immune system and endocrine system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5. It's all caps, discount the number 5. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. All right, let's play this CNN video here.
Pressure needed to get Russia to the negotiating table. Let's bring in former NATO Deputy Secretary General Rose Mueller. She is joining us now live from California. Rosa, it is good to see you. So President Trump is coming off of what he's described as a peace victory in Gaza, and he's using, in his words, the same model to try to bring this war in Ukraine to an end. Is that a valid analogy in your view that he's making? Whatever went into the actions that got to that ceasefire in Gaza can be done now in Ukraine.
He certainly had to pressure the leader of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, to get this solution, the ceasefire in Gaza. So I think he's looking to apply some tough pressure on Vladimir Putin. The question is how best to do it. The Russians have discounted, as you just heard, the Tomahawk as being, not a game changer in the war. On the other hand, it is a step in the direction of supplying a bigger and more capable weapon than the U.S. has supplied up to this point. So is this the way to do it? I'm not sure. There could be other inducements that the president may try on Vladimir Putin, such as opening up more economic opportunities. Those kinds of things have been very attractive to Putin in the past. So I don't think it's going to be a kind of unilayered response.
Economic opportunities, you mean sort of a carrot approach that you stop this war and we can have further economic ties after the fact, or in the interim as well?
No, I don't want to say in the interim. I do think that it would be a carrot offer to get the war over with. The president greeted, Putin in Alaska at the end of the summer, and there was a big coup men along on that trip, and Putin, I know, was hoping to get some business opportunities, at least in the talking phase. So I do understand that Mr. Trump has that in his mind as well. It's a classic diplomatic approach, right? The carrot and the stick.
Right, but I'm just wondering, because I picked up on that as well. President Trump has consistently talked about the great business and economic opportunities that await the U.S. and Russia once this war ends, and also continues to talk about the fate and the attrition of soldiers in this war, and Russians as well. Every week he throws out a number. These are 2 points that we don't hear from Vladimir Putin. And I'm just wondering if the president's focus is a bit miscalculated. We know that Russia's economy is facing some hardships, but they can withstand another few years, at least, given where they are now on a wartime footing. And he seems to be just fine having Russia isolated where it is, but still remaining close with other BRIC countries in particular. And, you know, the troop attrition, again, seems to be a bigger concern for Trump than Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. Yes, and that's very odd because I think Vladimir Putin at this moment is playing a dangerous game. You may remember that back in 2022, there was consideration of another big mobilization in Russia, and tens of thousands of Russian men fled the country. And so Putin has been very, very hesitant to try another mobilization. But now they are changing the law, apparently, that limits the use of 2 million reservists. And they've got that before the Russian parliament, which is a rubber stamp. So it looks to me like Putin is considering doing a hidden mobilization, calling it a simple change in the reserve law. And in that case, I think he's showing some vulnerability because that was politically the bridge too far for him back in 2022.
Yeah, we'll see if a play on words will allow this to pass with the Russian people. Remember, for so long, he called this a special military operation before actually identifying it for what it was. End of war. You rightly mentioned that the pressure as of late that President Trump has put on Prime Minister Netanyahu to get to this deal, but one has to note that he essentially allowed the Prime Minister in Israel to continue not only aggressively on the ground in Gaza, despite the concerns and really the isolation of Israel from a number of other countries, but also taking on Iran as well to get to this point. I'm wondering, we've seen pressure that President Trump, especially early in this administration, the first few weeks, put on President Zelensky. Do you think that to get to a ceasefire anywhere near where we saw in Gaza, he should also perhaps start allowing President Zelensky to do a bit more before he then attempts to rein him in, if he does have that oversight over him in the way that he doesn't over Putin?
I really wanted to point to the effectiveness. All the attention is on the Tomahawks at the moment, but Zelensky himself has talked about the effectiveness of 2 new Ukrainian missiles, 2 new drones that the Ukrainians have been launching against Russian energy facilities. Their gasoline and petroleum producing infrastructure is quite damaged by a series of Ukrainian drone attacks, and now they put their new missiles to use there too. By some accounts, gasoline production is down 20% in Russia, and the Russians have had to import from Belarus in order to be able to supply their drivers with gasoline. So obviously, the Ukrainians have been very good with their own indigenous missiles at causing damage on the Russian side as well. And I can see the president definitely encouraging that kind of activity on the Ukrainian side when he sees Mr. Zelensky on Friday.
Yeah, he does seem to be impressed by military wins. He said as much with regards to some of the strikes that Ukraine has successfully launched deep within Russia, the same in Gaza as well. I'm not in Gaza, in Israel, in terms of their strikes on Iran. As far as this meeting on Friday with President Zelensky and President Trump, what will you be looking at in terms of any tangible deals made coming out of it? Earlier in the segment, we talked about rare earth minerals perhaps being a deal that we see between President Trump and President Milei in Argentina. There was a rare earth deal in Ukraine we haven't talked about much at all as of late. But what will tell you that perhaps we've seen a shift in some strategy from President Trump with regards to this war?
Again, all eyes have been on the Tomahawks, but I actually think one of the more important discussions that's going on is the use of these so-called frozen Russian assets for the Ukrainian war effort and for eventually for reconstruction. And I know the Prime Minister of Ukraine is evidently in Washington now with a delegation to talk about this and other topics to prepare the way for the meeting on Friday. And I believe that if we see some U.S. movement, the U.S. has been quite resistant on using such frozen Russian assets. And so if there is some movement on that, I would say that that too will be a very significant change and pressure on Russia as well.
Right, and we have seen President Trump shift some of his views and even allow U.S. weapons to be delivered to Ukraine after the sale of those weapons to NATO countries, and then they would supply them to the Ukrainians. We've also seen in the past that following meetings with President Zelensky, we see either a phone call or another meeting, perhaps, with President Putin. Do you expect to see that happen this time as well?
I don't expect it immediately, really. I know yesterday the president turned to Steve Witkoff and said, Steve, next we work on Russia. So I would expect the special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to be sent off perhaps to talk to the Russians again. And indeed, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman today, welcomed working again with Mr. Witkoff, said how they found him an effective negotiator. So they were turning a bit of a charm offensive also in the direction of Washington. So I would expect that we'll see some more shuttle diplomacy from Steve Witkoff, and that there won't be a lot of interaction immediately between Putin and Trump. But I am hopeful that we'll see a much more positive meeting on Friday at the White House with Mr. Zelensky than we saw last February when there was that disastrous meeting. I do think those two men now have a much better way of working together, a modus vivendi, and so I expect the meeting will be businesslike and I hope productive.
Yeah, we all do as well. Their relationship has improved significantly since that NATO moment there in February in the Oval Office. Roosevelt Miller, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to go to Bloomberg. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the turmeric. The turmeric will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. That will help with your immune system and your brain function and vascular system. Lignans helps with your immune system, your endocrine system, brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals. Very important for bringing down that inflammation, helps that cerebral system, helps that vascular system, helps the immune system. And ashwagandha root helps you to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. That will bring down the inflammatory response of high levels of sugar in your blood. When you have high levels of sugar in your blood, it causes an inflammation cascade that leads to plaque formation. You don't want that. So you want to control your blood glucose levels. And by controlling your cortisol levels, you're helping your immune system. Because when you have elevated cortisol levels chronically, it's actually immunosuppressive. So you want to stop that. You want to get rid of that cortisol. And if you have elevated cortisol levels, it can do damage to your tissues. So you want to control that. Really important to take the ashwagandha root. Now, if you stack this together, especially during the fall and winter season, you're going to be boosting up your immune system and bringing down inflammation. All right? But if you take this every day, you're actually slowing down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, stack the turmeric, the lignans, and the ashwagandha together. It's a very powerful stack to boost up that immune system, help with your cardiovascular system, help with your brain function. It's going to protect those neurons because it's bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level. And by doing that, you're slowing down the aging process. Because when you bring down inflammation and you're soaking up free radicals and you do that regularly, you are allowing your body to heal. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
All right, many thanks, Charlie Pell. I think we need Scott Besson to start talking again. Interesting how stories evolve through the day, because the headline in the first half of the session was Besson's soothing words on China lifts stocks, and I guess that only lasts so long with the S&P 500 turning negative before our eyes. Thanks for being with us here on the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Interesting conversation with Congressman Liccardo as we make our way through day 15 of the government shutdown. Roughly 1 hour from now, senators will vote again on the continuing resolution that continues to fail. We'll let you know what happens, or maybe we should just make a promise to let you know if anything changes, because this has become quite the spin cycle most recently here. The cycle at the Pentagon today is out the door. This is a fascinating story, and if you listen to this program, you heard this one coming after the Secretary of War, as President Trump likes to call him, Pete Hegseth, laid down a marker for the Pentagon press corps right up to and until signing off on a piece of paper mandating new regulations in the way the press cover the Pentagon here. It's not going over well with anyone, well, maybe except OAN. But let me speak about our own shop here. Bloomberg News, along with most every other national news shop, including Fox News, Newsmax, Washington Times, some of the conservative outlets, along with all the others, the three-letter networks, the Washington Post, New York Times, and so on, the 5 major TV networks say they will refuse to sign the new reporting limits set out by the Defense Secretary, and they've been given a couple of weeks to do so. We saw this coming in slow motion. A Bloomberg News statement reads, the Pentagon's new policy on press access restricts the sort of standard news gathering essential in any democracy. We will continue to uphold the values of an independent free press and rigorously report on the U.S. government, military, and matters of public interest. Following the Hegseth criteria endorsed by President Trump. So what's going on right now at the Pentagon? There's a bunch of journalists and their support crew dismantling computer systems, breaking down furniture, and getting out of the building. At some point, they'll have to turn in their credentials as well. Yeah. The process of covering the Pentagon is about to change dramatically. And I'll be very curious to see what happens to the leaks coming out of the Pentagon. With one news organization, this OAN, they're going to be the only ones in there, acting almost like a state TV network. And this is where we start our conversation with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist partner at Stone Court Capital, and Jeannie is our Democratic analyst, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. What do you think about this, Jeannie? Not so much the protocol, but the response to see Fox News, the Washington Times, and other conservative outlets, with the exception of OAN, getting on the same page as CNN, MSNBC, and the others, yes, including Bloomberg, to push back on this Pentagon policy. Does that give you hope for the state of the national news media?
Yeah, I think it's very heartening that they have joined together to say that this is absolutely unacceptable. Let's not forget, the Pentagon gets about $1 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money. It sends our young men and women into war. It's happening at a time where shooting boats in Venezuela, killing people. The president, just hours after he says there's a chance we could have to go in and disarm Hamas, and Pete Hegseth flies off to Europe and says, oh, by the way, you can't enter the building until you agree to abide by these absolutely, insane, really is the way to put it, restrictions on press freedom. So I do think it is very, very, very heartening. I also think that Pete Hegseth doesn't understand a lot about reporting. Does anybody think reporters are just going to say, oh, okay, no more coverage of the Pentagon? I think we're going to see, Joe, and this is my guess, even better reporting. They're going to talk to their sources, and they're going to be hard around the Pentagon from the outside. So I think he's doing himself a disservice if he's trying to control the narrative.
I do tend to agree with you on what could be enhanced reporting. We're going to end up seeing stories that we would not have seen otherwise because of this challenge by the Pentagon, and we should be more specific. This is a 21-page document that journalists were asked to sign last month. As we report, one of the most concerning elements is a line barring journalists. This is the heart of the policy. Barring journalists from reporting classified and even some unclassified information without the permission of the Pentagon. That's what would change here. You'd have to get essentially the secretary to sign off on your story before it goes out. And the secretary doesn't work for any newsroom. He did used to work, of course, for Fox News, which is, by the way, packing up its bags right now and getting out of the correspondence corridor, as it's called. This goes back to the years just after World War II. The then Defense Secretary in 1972, Secretary Melvin Laird renamed the Pentagon hallway Correspondence Corridor and dedicated a memorial to reporters killed while covering U.S. foreign wars. If you walk down the corridor, in fact, they have a memorial set up there invoking the likes of Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, Andy Rooney, and others. What do you think about this, Rick? You spent more time in the Pentagon than most civilians due to your career here in Washington, and I know you're very familiar with some of the top brass, or you have been. You prepared them for confirmation hearings. The press corps is a pretty important element of what happens in that building. What happens now?
Well, as you pointed out, it's going to be a new question on all the confirmation hearings that are coming up. So they better be prepared to defend the policy being made by the Secretary of War in front of Congress, because this is going to be an issue. And look, there's always been tension, in reporting at the Pentagon. There are a lot of reasons to keep certain plans and activities confidential. It's not an intelligence agency, so it doesn't have the protections that a lot of intelligence agencies have with the use of the press. And Jeannie's right. I mean, it's the largest single use of taxpayer dollars that the government has. And so how do you manage the push and the pull of the public disclosure of what goes on there with the need for some level of confidentiality on war plans, irrespective of who's tweeting them out on their Signal accounts. And so, long story short, it's an unenforceable policy. The reporters I've talked to, point out not only the point that you made, Joe, but also that there's a bar from even soliciting sensitive information and could get you thrown out of the Pentagon press corps. So, one, you don't know what's sensitive, and two, if you don't solicit, you don't get. You got to ask the questions, and so it's obviously an extreme situation, and I am not surprised that there's been a walkout, because the Pentagon press corps has been heralded as one of the greatest institutions inside and outside of government, and as you point out, people have given their lives for this coverage. So if Pete Hegseth thinks he's going to make some progress here, he better look at revising his policy, because these journalists know what they have and they're not going to lose it.
Yeah, well, that was very well put. We remember what Pete Hegseth had to say to the media briefing following our strikes against Iran, Jeannie. That was a massive, here's what you should be talking about kind of speech, as some reporters were questioning whether Iranian nuclear sites were totally obliterated, as the secretary and as the president had said. Well, what's going to happen in the Pentagon briefings now? I was talking to producer James about this earlier. Are you going to have one chair with ON sitting in it? What's the point of even disseminating information?
That's absolutely right. I really hope that we are able to see the pictures of this and get the feed, because it will be very, very good to watch. The reality is Pete Hegseth has missed the mark that Donald Trump understands, and I'm surprised Donald Trump isn't pulling him in. You know the old adage, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? If he really thinks the press corps are his enemies, keep them close like Donald Trump does. He has no trouble answering questions all day.
I think the reason why they're doing this is they're trying to reduce leaks and stop the generals from complaining about the restructuring that Hegseth is instituting. If you're canceling programs, if you are getting rid of generals that are no longer needed or out of shape, don't you think that the military brass, don't you think their underlings will be complaining? Of course. So instead of having the Pentagon be a bunch of individuals running to the press that's roaming the hallways of the Pentagon, writing stories about how the generals are upset that one, program's being canceled and, that there's a restructuring of the Army or whatever. He wants to control the narrative. There is nothing wrong with that. There's literally nothing wrong with that, because the Pentagon has been wasting American taxpaying dollars for too many decades. Secondly, we're going to war with China. Wake up. Wake up. We are starting to get our house in order economically, politically, and also militarily for a war in the Pacific.
Us that they can't wander around the halls asking people questions, which is what they've been doing since there was a Pentagon. And so now he's got to sit down with a group and say, okay, what is it that I can do to meet my needs, for confidentiality, which is an issue inside the Pentagon, and make it, accessible to you and your First Amendment protections. And there's a deal there to be done. It is the deal administration. Go cut a deal.
That's right.
Here we go. I think Donald Trump would appreciate that.
And just yesterday he talked about moving the press corps out of the White House. Just behold that for a minute, because we've heard that story before too. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shantano, Bloomberg Politics contributors, great insights. Thank you for the panel. Maybe this will change. Christopher Smart is on.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. C60 is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning. But take it every day, teaspoon a day. You can get it in avocado, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. Now, C60 has to be in an oil because it's lipid soluble for proper absorption. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you buy the higher ounce configuration. And what C60 does is it'll soak up free radicals. And when you soak up free radicals, you're reducing stress in the cell, in your extracellular matrix, and also at your vascular level. And when you're soaking up those free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation, because free radicals are needed to oxidize LDL. And when you have oxidized LDL, you're increasing plaque in your arteries. You don't want that, all right? So you need to soak up the free radicals to prevent the oxidized LDL. Secondly, if you soak up free radicals at the cerebral level, at the neural level, then what you're doing is you're reducing the stress on the neuron, and you're maintaining the myelin sheath. You're helping the mitochondria of the neuron, so you have more ATP, and the neuron will be able to fire those neurotransmitters. When the neurons are performing better, over time, what's going to happen is you're going to have better neuroplasticity. So you're going to be thinking better, and you'll have better memory. At the cellular and tissue level of the rest of your body, your cells will perform better because your mitochondria in those cells will be healthier. It's going to be soaking up those free radicals. The C60 will soak up those free radicals, boost up the health of the mitochondria. You'll have more ATP, and the cells will perform better. If the cells are performing better in different tissues, the organ systems are going to perform better. This will help with your immune system. This will help with your endocrine system, your glands. Very important. Within 2 months of taking C60, you're going to notice the effects. You're going to have more energy, and you'll feel that your body is healing. After a year, you're going to visibly notice a difference in the mirror. You'll notice that you look younger. Why? Because your immune system and endocrine system is getting better. Your metabolism is better. You have more energy. Your cells are working properly. Your brain function is working better. The basal layer of your skin will be healthier. And that's where your new skin cells are produced. C60 improves your basal layer. And when you do that, you're actually looking younger. I've been taking C60 since 2016, every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60, and that's part of your anti-aging protocol, but there's a benefit. It's not just slowing down the aging process. This thing's helping to boost up your immune system and help with your endocrine system and your other organ systems. Very important to take every day. Please go to my store, use discount 5 on any order, you get $5 off. It's all caps, discount, and then the number 5, it's $5 off. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. If you follow my advice and take these supplements and you stack them a certain way, like I've been saying throughout this transmission, you're going to get the max benefit. Because it's not about just taking one supplement, it's about how you stack them together. And it's a holistic approach. Proper diet, proper exercise. Do some resistance training. Do some cardio. Do some stretching and balancing exercises. Why? Because by doing stretching and balancing exercises, you're actually activating the cerebellum. And when you activate the cerebellum, you're improving your gait, you're improving your coordination, your balance. And that's something that starts to
wither away when you get older. Well, the more robust it is, the more you activate it, the longer it will stay healthy. Learning new things, having some spirituality or mindfulness, that will help you to get into parasympathetic mode. And that way your body is more calm, not so stressed out. So if you approach this holistically with the proper supplementation, you're going to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get healthy in 2025. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.